Bebop Show. Got jazz for you for about another half hour. Hope that you are enjoying it. Hope you're having a good...
Acting Chair. Today's the 5th of June, and this is the Architectural Review Board hearing. Could we have the Secretary call roll, please?
Chair Lippert, Vice Chair Pop,
Present.
Board Member Liu,
Present.
Board Member Malone-Pritchard, present. Board Member Guyer.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is the time when any member of the public may speak to any item they wish. I don't have any cards. If there are people here to speak to items and would like to do so now, you could come up to the dais and we can have you do a card afterwards if you like. I do want to just point out for anyone who is in the room today that the item number 5, the study session for the downtown DAS, has been postponed to the meeting on the 19th. So if you are here for that, please don't stick around. So with that, I think we'll move forward. Are there any agenda changes, additions, or deletions today?
The only other one is the 250 Hamilton Master Sign Program project will be heard in July 17th. But there's time to advertise that, so.
Okay, thank you very much. So with that, we'll move to approval of minutes. We have 3 meetings worth of minutes to approve, the April 3rd, April 17th, and May 1st. Alex.
I have a correction for the minutes for April 3rd. So it's item number 2, 2500 El Camino Real. So under Architectural Review Board actions, it says number 1 is the Lacy panel color. And I think that's Lacy was the color name, but it's just basically the off-white stucco color.
Great.
Right? Number 2 is some provision for the property line improvements. And I would say that that is the one that's for the adjacent Wells Fargo building, right. The wall that's being exposed.
So how would you like to, do you have a suggestion for the language that you'd like that to be revised?
Some provision for the neighbor's existing wall.
Okay.
And then there was one other item which was to go back to staff, which was a gate, some sort of gate to screen the utilities in that same vicinity. And that's all that I have.
Anyone else have comments on any of the other 3?
I move that we accept the minutes as amended.
Thank you. Do we have a second?
I'll second. I'll second.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, and that passes 4-0-0. I'm sorry, 4-0-1-0.
Right.
Thank you. All right, and with that, we'll move forward to our first item of the day, which, sorry, Amy, go ahead.
There are other minutes. We could put that off to the end of the agenda if you'd like, the other minutes.
Oh, we were doing all 3 of them together.
Oh, got it. Thanks.
Let me just clarify that. Claire, was that your motion? Okay. And
yeah.
Robert, you're fine with that? Great. Yeah, so that was our intent, was to
Drink
move and approve all 3 together. Thank you. So for the first item today, 261 Hamilton Avenue, request by Cody Anderson Wozni Architects for architectural review and historic resource board review of a historic rehabilitation that includes the relocation of floor area from the existing basement to allow a 5,910 square foot addition at the rear of the building and establishment of a 1,196 square foot mezzanine floor for a net zero gain in floor area for a historic resource located within the Ramona Street Historic District. The project also includes a request for the reclassification from a Category 3 historic resource to a Category 2 historic resource to allow the approved rehabilitation to generate 15,000 square feet of transferable development rights. The zone district is CDC GFP. The environmental assessment is that it is exempt. And I think that's what we've got. Do we have a presentation from staff?
Yes, good morning. Thank
Thanks,
you.
Claire.
This morning we have our second ARB review of the proposed historic rehabilitation project for 261 Hamilton. At the last ARB meeting on April 17th, the board voted to continue the project so the applicant could further refine the details of the proposed addition, which they have done and will present to you later this morning. Included in the staff report is a more extensive discussion regarding the allowed improvements to grandfathered legal non-complying facilities. The primary issue for this project hinges on the building's grandfathered status and the definition of building envelope. The report provides much more explanation, but to summarize, staff has been for many years interpreting building envelope to mean the legal three-dimensional mass or buildable area of a site once all the development regulations such as setbacks, height, FAR have been applied to the site. The board is welcome to weigh in on this issue, but it will ultimately be up to the City Council to affirm staff's interpretation of the building envelope for this project and for future ones. The project is scheduled for City Council review on June 23rd for consideration of the historic reclassification request and the historic rehabilitation project, and Council will take final action on this project. And this concludes staff's presentation. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Excuse me, I'm going to go back just for a moment. I was reminded that I need to close the public comment period from the oral communications element, so we'll do that now. And move forward. Do we have let's see, I've got some speaker cards for this. And what we'll do is we'll take the presentation from the applicant first, and then I have 2 cards. If there is anyone else that wishes to speak to this item, go ahead and get your cards in. So do we have someone prepared to speak today? Brad, great. I have 10 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, board. We put together a short presentation to, I think, more or less that focuses on a lot of the comments that we heard at the April 17th board meeting, which we saw centered around on sort of the facade design itself, its composition, discussion of differentiation versus compatibility, how the facade itself is organized, some of the detailing and the ornament and windows. There was comments on the roof terrace itself, wanting to see more information, how the fit and finish of the roof terrace itself would come together, and then as well as some of the exterior detailing and the exterior lighting. So just to kind of recap and walk around the 4 elevations in the facade as to what we're doing to the building, I wanted to just kind of touch on some of the features that are original to the building. You know, Burge Clark had a series of punched openings with this strong rhythm as it wraps around the building with this singular form, and then breaking them up with some windows up at the top that are a little bit smaller, and some of this playfulness with the loggias up at the top to get that depth and relief, and then the different types of balconies that he had with the smaller balconies up at the top to just kind of give some punch and some accent. Meanwhile, having sort of this the second floor level having a continuous band almost that wraps around the entire building on the Ramona Street side, and then I'll show on the Hamilton side. Our work, as we talked about before, was really focused on bringing back the storefronts and the ground level, kind of back to life, removing the fabric awnings, the red ones that are out there now, restoring and enhancing sort of the tile at the ground floor, the pointed archways, the OG cornered archways. Nothing really has changed in our submittal since the 17th on this elevation, except we've just identified just a couple of sign locations that we've included in this submittal. As you go to the next, turn the corner and you come around Hamilton, again, nothing really has changed, but just sort of echoing some of the detailing that Burge Clark had with, at the end gable, sort of this recessed opening with a decorative iron grating and bars over the top. Again, accenting the top with some smaller windows that match, that are similar in style to the main windows that wrap around the fronts of the buildings. Again, we've added signage locations. This second floor strong line of balconies at the second floor level, and then the loggia reappears again over here on this elevation. The ground floor treatment here is consistent with what we presented again at the last meeting. So then we get to Centennial Walk and where the addition is and where a lot of the key features I think were focused and where the comments were coming from. So here's the elevation that we submitted at the last meeting. On the original historic end piece on Centennial Walk, we're reconstructing a new pointed sort of Gothic arch window that mimics and replicates some of the archways and the windows that we have shown on the storefronts over on the Hamilton side. And it's the only real piece that we're doing here. And then as you get into this, here's, with the addition, the middle portion of the addition recesses back, is what we presented, with a series of rectangular, almost storefront-like openings to kind of give this distinction between the punched openings and the solid mass, and then having a glassier front at the centerpiece. And then we have the stair tower end elevation over here. And just to kind of touch on this, what we had presented at the last meeting, we had the two windows over here that were a little different in size and proportion and window mullions. The elevation has, there's a little bit of a tilt to it in the sense that we got windows on one side and then some very Spartan ornamentation, I think, on this side with just the glass block and then the squared off opening over here. So the comments that we heard at the last meeting, and we've kind of paraphrasing this on the slide, and I think we tried to capture, I think, more or less the essence of what we heard from the board as it related to the elevations here. One was, I think the discussion centered around, what compatibility versus differentiation, and are we, going really modern, or are we going to be going really compatible, and can we, and where does that what we presented in April kind of seems to be floating somewhere out in the middle. And so we tried to capture this by saying, well, maybe the tile doesn't make sense and we should consider an alternative roof finish. We heard that maybe we need to kind of focus in on the elevation here to find some more balance and kind of treat that elevation at the stair tower end piece a little more graciously to balance out, I think, the end elevation up against, Burge Clark's original building. And then also taking a look at how that the ground floor level is treated as well. Other comments that we heard were kind of looking at the actual proportions and size a little more carefully, I think, on some of the windows and some of these, the detailing in through here. So what we're representing is, in essence, we've kept more or less this middle section unchanged, and we've maintained in our proposal here today the clay tile roof would remain. I'll talk about that in a minute. But to focus, we really focus in on this end elevation. We've added two windows over here on the stairwell side. So these go into the office space. The proportions and size and the spacing are, the proportions and shape of the window match the Burge Clark window. The only thing that we've differentiated with is more or less the mullion pattern, but again, that way that the windows can stand out and be somewhat distinct and that they're not a direct match. We've added another balcony to continue that line that we see on the other elevations as it wraps around. And the idea and the thinking here is as you walk around the building and admiring the original structure, that we're kind of arriving at this end point that's sort of gracious and completes, the overall design of the building. We've changed the what was a glassy double door entrance into that stairwell into a solid wood door. It's a door that's into a back staircase. It's not really signifying an entrance, and we felt that the primary entrance into the tenant space is the one that would be here at the ground floor level, and then adding an arched top over into here. About the clay tile roof, I want to just touch on just briefly, and I can take questions and comments if we want to talk about it further. Our client is applying for tax credits through the state and the National Trust, and the review of the project at a preliminary level has indicated that a more traditional approach to the design of the facility and the addition to be compatible with this style, they had strongly urged about having the roof remain as tile. Elevations here virtually pretty much unchanged that we saw at the last meeting as well. Here's a shot of the rendering with it being updated with what the facade would look like here. and then a shot looking down the street, and then a shot looking back from Hamilton back into the alley. So this kind of, I just want to reiterate to the board that the project is part of the national, with our application to the National Trust, is that they're being highly sensitive and looking at this as part of the Ramona Street District, and that sort of compatibility is the building, and the addition fits within this overall context, and hence sort of the choice with the clay tile roof. At the roof terraces, we've submitted with the drawings that you've seen. We've developed the design much further. We've, listening to the board comments, we've put landscaping out at the perimeter edge with patio trees, raised planters up at the edge to kind of get some life and some warmth up at that street, at the edge of Centennial Walk, and having sort of Class A styled contract furnishings for seating in and around the edge, as well as out in the middle. Some planting that will be closer up against the edge of the building and through here. We've looked at the flooring as well to have a raised wood. On the back side with the lighting, as requested, we've included photometric studies. In essence, the light levels are about 2 foot candles or less out at the middle of the street, and I think our brightest spot right at the door is about 3.6 foot candles. Here's the existing fixtures on the edge, and this is the fixtures that we're proposing for the elevation here. And then lastly, sort of showing the building in section and some of the detailing with the gutters and the downspouts that we'll have on the addition, which will be exposed gutter with a downspout into a collector head with a concealed rainwater leader inside the building. The stucco is going to have radiused edges, was the other comment. And I think that was it, seeing that the yellow light's on. We have a sample board in front of you as well. So we've added actually the fabric awning.
Go ahead and
I was going to just touch on just briefly. We have an updated sample board that's in front of you to pass around with an updated stucco color that's just a slightly refined white, not as bright as what we had presented before. We've added to the board the blue fabric for the awning as a sample, as well as the tile for the roof. I'm trying to think what else. I think that's about it.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, let me open the public comment period. I have 2 cards for this project. The first will be Jeff Levinsky, followed by Doria Suma. You'll have 3 minutes to speak to the item. Please state your name and begin.
Thank you. My name is Jeff Levinsky. Good morning, commissioners and staff. I'd like to thank the staff for providing more information about the grandfathering ordinance and specifically how it interprets the key phrase that remodeling a non-conforming downtown building, quote, shall not result in an increase of the height, length, building envelope, or any other increase in the size of the improvement, end of quote. You've all seen legal contracts. They typically begin by defining the terms within the contract. They do so because those same terms might mean something different elsewhere. Well, an ordinance is the same. When the grandfathering ordinance was written, it explicitly defined the building envelope to mean, quote, the three-dimensional spatial configuration of a building's volume and mass, end of quote. It did so to help us here in 2014 interpret the term building envelope within the context of the ordinance. Now, the staff say that in the past they've used building envelope to mean buildable area, and they've used size to refer to floor area. No doubt they have at times in various settings. But the question today is only how they have interpreted those terms when evaluating the grandfathering ordinance for downtown buildings. That is, we expected to hear about non-conforming downtown buildings that were remodeled or replaced. We expected that such projects met all other requirements of the grandfathering ordinance so that their approvals hinged just on what building envelope and size meant. And then we expected to see that in the reports for those projects, building envelope and size were indeed consistently interpreted as the staff say. Palo Alto has a policy of government transparency. If the staff knows of such past reports, we ask that they share them with your board and the public so that we may all examine them. There is widespread concern in the community that the city government is not enforcing its own laws regarding development. Faith in our local government and its boards and commissions is declining, as demonstrated in recent surveys run both by the city and others and by Measure D last year. Here today is an opportunity to help turn that around by showing that our government will uphold its laws. I urge you to take that opportunity. Thank you.
Thank
Good
you.
morning, ARB members and staff. Doria Suma, and we sent you an email yesterday that described in detail our concerns with the project at 261 Hamilton. In particular, how the project is, in our opinion, not in conformance with the Palo Alto Municipal Code. While the applicant should be applauded for their intent to restore this important historic building, I believe that it is also important that the integrity of the building code be maintained. We agree that it does comply with some of the conditions for grandfathering, such as it does not increase the FAR, but it does increase the overall size of the building and the building envelope, which has expanded. By Palo Alto standards, those things are not allowed, set forth in our municipal code. Regardless of what's going on below ground, the common person will see and experience an expanded and larger building. Therefore, I urge the ARB to consider the points that we raised, and I look forward to your response. And I won't be redundant with what Jeff, the earlier speaker, had said, but we would have expected, since we had brought these issues up earlier, that staff might have provided a list of buildings that had been interpreted this way. We still don't think it would be correct because the code is very explicit, and whereas in some cases the code is very hard to understand, here it's very simple and clear. So thank you very much.
Thank you. With that, we'll close the public hearing and return to the board for comments and perhaps a motion. So why don't we start with Board Member Malone Pritchard. Thank you.
Thank you. I am very much in support of the project as proposed. Just had a couple of administrative things to go through regarding findings. If we look at attachment B, findings, these are the architectural review findings. Finding number 2, I would like to strengthen. The finding states that the design is compatible with the immediate environment of the site. I would like to add to that the compatibility was also determined by HRB based upon Secretary of Interior standards. And finding number 5, the design promotes harmonious transitions in scale and character in areas between different designated land uses. We should also make a statement that it is maintaining the existing transition. And then the last one is a really minor note. On sheet A2.2, there are some notes that aren't matching up with their tags. So if you look for note number 10, it's not matching what note number 10 reads. So if you could work with staff to resolve that so that the final documents are correct. That's all I have.
Thank you. Board Member Goyer.
The applicant met with me in my office for about a half hour or so, week and a half ago, something like that. So I got some clarifications. I still have some problems with the project, but I think I'll just hold off on those. I'm okay.
Board Member Liu.
Great. So I have some questions for staff again on the grandfathering issue. So when I was reading the staff report, I actually had the same reaction as Mr. Levinsky. I was trying to think of precedents, and I was trying to think of other projects that have come before the board where this has come up, and I couldn't really think of any. So I was wondering if there is a way to make a list of other projects, maybe not for us, but at least the council, because it seems like that's the legal precedents that are very important on this case. I mean, thinking of where this could go, down the road, it seems like that would be like really important to have.
I understand, and it's in the minutes, and so we'll do our best to, pull together a list.
I'm actually seeing a hand
For
from the
council.
audience. I'm seeing a hand from the audience here. Mr. Rapp seems he may have something to add to the conversation. So.
Roxy Rapp, the developer. Gosh, I guess it's been probably 8 years ago, might even be 10 years ago, 530 Ramona, right across the street where Chantilly Restaurant used to be. That's a Category 2 building, historical. We did get the tax relief from the federal government and the state, and we redid the whole rear end of the building.
Right.
We added a whole third floor to the building. Before it was just one floor with mezzanine. So that would be exactly right across the street.
Great. And then
Thank you.
Yeah, and that project turned out really well. Thank you for that. I think just my, I don't have the benefit of all the researching all the precedents and stuff, but I mean, if I just read the ordinance, I'm sort of inclined to agree with Mr. Levinsky, because in downtown, there aren't any setbacks, right? So I would interpret the intent of the ordinance when they mention envelope, building envelope. I actually would sort of be inclined to think of that as actually the actual building and not like an allowable building area, because I mean, there are no setbacks, so it's just the height, right, and floor area, which are already mentioned in the in the ordinance. But that being said, because we don't have any setbacks, really generally, I mean, there are some cases where there are setbacks down in the downtown district. But I mean, I think generally the idea is that they're big urban buildings, and that, so just in the spirit of this project, I mean, I think that just because it's it's because it's enlarging, like the volume, to me, it's like, so what? I mean, that's what the buildings downtown do. They're urban, they're urban buildings. So I mean, I think if the argument is for like no growth, I think that's fine. But it seems like this one has a loophole, which is in the code, which is they've already paid into the basement's paid into the parking assessment district, and they're moving that upstairs. But there was already, the footprint is already still the same, right? I mean, there's already like at least the first floor and the mezzanine on there. So there's not an enlarging of the footprint. It's not taller than 50 feet. So I can see a case for that. And I think the other thing too is on historic buildings, they're very challenging. And if you look at like the floor plate of this building, some of the wings, or one of the wings is as small as 35 feet. And in a contemporary office building, like we have one today on VMware, I mean, it's 120 feet wide. And there's just a huge difference between like an old building like this and what a modern office building would use. And that I think that some allowances have to be made, for the historic buildings. I mean, you talk about, well, like there are a whole bunch of building code requirements, which I think were mentioned at the last hearing. Big elevators, ADA accessible bathrooms, and hallways and corridors. Those things, when I work on projects, those things take up a huge amount of space. It's huge, and it really is very important, I think, to allow historic buildings like this to evolve and adapt. So that being said, I think I don't really have a specific opinion on the grandfathering ordinance. I mean, I think that's one for the attorneys and really hash out all the precedents, and we don't really have all of that information here. But I would encourage the staff to get more of that, because I think it's going to, just knowing the way things are in Palo Alto, it's going to come down to that level of scrutiny. Regarding the building, I have some questions for the applicant. One is, where is the electrical transformer? That's sort of in the conditions of approval. I know there's probably an existing one, and then curious if you need a new one.
Alex, would you like them to come and just?
Yeah, I'll just read my list of questions first, and then in the conditions of approval, typically we don't allow copper gutters on new buildings, and I think you're showing copper in your plans. The new stair door you're showing as wood with glazing and stuff, and I was wondering, that is an exit stair, and there are usually some code issues with revolving the doors, and I was wondering if you had flushed that out. And then also you're showing part of the basement being infilled, like underneath the sidewalks, and then presumably there's we'll be replacing the sidewalks, and then so I was wondering if there's a hardscape plan for that. And I think that's all that. Yeah, I think that's all that I have on for you.
As far as the transformers, we're tapping into an electrical vault existing service out at Hamilton side. We're going to have a transformer in the basement. There will be no surface-mounted transformers anywhere on the exterior of the site. Let's see, your second question, I think, was with the gutters, correct?
Right, yeah, copper.
Yes, so on the existing original historic building, we're going to be preserving and maintaining the existing gutters. With the addition, the gutters will be steel gutters that will have a pre-finished bronze finish to them with all of the downspouts that are exposed on the exterior. Your third question was?
The stair door, the new...
Stair door, yes. With it being a stair door to the exterior, it's going to have a wood finish on the exterior, and it'll likely be a steel door itself to maintain the fire rating.
So just like the veneer things. I've always looked at those. I always process they look kind of fake to me, but I've actually never used one. I mean, are you confident about the ability to make it look like it should be? Okay, good. And then the sidewalk.
Oh, that's right, the sidewalk. So we're
the landscape plans are in the conditions of approval to come back to the, I think, subcommittee, and I was wondering if that could come back.
The sidewalk and streetscape work will be based upon city standards and coordinated directly with the city. So the trees will be picked out by the city and so on and so forth. There's nothing unique to what we're doing there.
And then on other projects downtown, it's come up with a sidewalk color and textures, and I know Roxy's, we've hatched it out before on other buildings on what the sidewalk is. So it is the color and pattern and stuff, and the city's standards allow different options. So you do have to propose something to us, I think, that's the way it goes. Yeah.
Okay.
So if that could come back to the subcommittee. And I think that's all that I have at this time.
All right, thank you, Alex. So we'll return back around here for any additional, for me, right, me. Great. Actually, I don't have any questions for the staff at this point. While I very much appreciate the comments that Alex has shared with us in regard to the transfer of area and building envelope and some of those specifics, I really do believe that those items are squarely in the staff and, frankly, the Planning and Transportation Commission's purview, and not something that the Architecture Review Board has control over or is really responsible for recommending to the director. So maybe I'll just jump forward and say I do have a couple quick questions here for the applicant. For the new deck, the planters that you're describing up there, I assume you'll have irrigation for those, and that will be set up properly.
Absolutely.
You did have a note about an optional green screen. What would be the decision-making factor for that?
That'll be the tenant's decision.
Okay, that's fine. Just thank you for showing the previous and the current side by side the way you did. I think it's always really helpful when an applicant does that. I'll disclose that I did meet with you in advance, and we went through some of the comments that we had made before, and I really appreciate the response that you prepared here.
Thank you.
I think it's very balanced, and the character of the addition and the remodel are much more in line with what I had hoped to see, and at this point I'm completely prepared to support the project moving forward.
Thank you.
I had the same question as Alex about the wood door. I've not seen that done in that way before, and if you're confident about that, I will be as well. So that's all that I had. Claire, did you have anything further?
Just wanted to thank you for making the revisions that you did. I think that the revisions you made to the stair tower in particular have really strengthened the project. And I also wanted to disclose that I did meet with the applicant in my office just to review the changes.
Thank you. All right. Board Member Guyer.
Yeah, I'm real close on the fence on this. This particular applicant, I wasn't happy at all with the last go around. This one is a lot better, so I can probably support it, but I'm not thrilled about the solution.
I'm curious.
We spent an hour in my office arguing back and forth, and I would have approached it differently, and I think the solution should have been done differently. So, I mean, I'm not going to hold up the project just because the way I approached it would have been differently. I still have a different concept of making something or mimicking something versus making something a modern approach to an old building. And that's the way I've done various additions to registered landmarks, and usually I've approached them where they have the feel for the addition, I should say, for the original building, but they don't try and match it. One of the problems I had was with the roof. That I hear that one of the problems that they're concerned with is, I guess, because of trying to get the funding for it, but that doesn't, that's out of my purview, as you said, whether they get funding or not funding, but that's why I said it's a different opinion.
All right, thank you. Alex, any further thoughts? Or
I do have one last question for the architect. So on the overhang over the balcony, the new overhang, I think you're showing it as like heavy timber or not. Do you also have to have like sprinklers? Is that because it's deep? I mean, a lot of on the projects that I've worked on before, like beyond, I forgot what it is, like 3 feet. And it had to be.
The projection is over 5 feet, and we do not project out that far.
Got it. So you're saying sprinklers when they're over 5 feet, then they.
Yes.
And then I think the thing that I have run into is that, at least as I'm trying to think, is that sometimes the fire departments will measure it on the diagonal, which kind of gets screwed. But I think you don't have a diagonal on this one, so you're okay. Okay, great, thank you.
All right, I have no further comments on this. Is there a board member who is interested in making a motion today?
Okay, so I will move that we approve the project as conditioned in the staff report with the following additions. So we're amending finding B2, attachment B, item number 2. Let me get to add the HRB's review of the Secretary of Interior standards, right? B5 to add that it's maintaining the existing transition between different land uses. Right. that sheet A 2.2 be coordinated in the notes and the tags. And then that all of the notes regarding copper gutters in the new edition are changed to steel with a bronze finish. And I think that's it. Then it's just a suggestion to the staff is to please work on the precedents for the council. Great.
Thank you. Just, if I can, you had also mentioned coming to the subcommittee with that sidewalk.
Thank you for reminding me, yes. And as I think you've already have it conditioned that the landscaping is going to return back to subcommittee.
All right, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Board Member Liu, would you like to speak to your motion?
No, I think that we've already hashed. I think we've
Thank you.
described everything. I don't think I have anything new to add.
I have nothing further to add.
All right, well then let's vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Nay.
All right, so this item passes 3-1-1-0 with Board Member Guyer dissenting and Board Member Lippert absent. Thank you very much.
As we prepare for the next items, I want to state that I am recused on item number 2, 2555 Park Boulevard, because the applicant is my employer. And I'm also recused on item number 3, 3421 Hillview Avenue, because I am a VMware shareholder. So I will return for the final item.
All right, yeah, we're a short board now, but we can move forward with the three of us. So let's move on to new business now. Our next item is 2555 Park Boulevard. This is a request by FGY Architects on behalf of Tarleton Properties for a preliminary architectural review of a proposal to demolish an existing 10,800 square foot two-story office building and construct a 23,269 square foot three-story office building with one level of below-grade parking and a roof terrace in the CC2 zoning district. This is a preliminary review, so we'll just be having a discussion today. There will be no direction or motion as a result. And we'll start with Board Member Liu. Oh, I'm sorry. Excuse me. No, at this. Start with the staff report, again, please.
Hello, Russ Reich is the project planner. He is absent today. And so basically, this is a project that prelim architectural review. It's to demolish an existing 10,800 square foot building and construct a 23,269 square foot building that will have office use. And basically, we are conducting an environmental review right now. We have a consultant firm who is preparing an environmental impact report because the existing building is a mid-century modern building that qualifies as a historic resource, and it's to be demolished. There is some concern from the public, as noted on page 2 of the staff report. We've also received some emails from the public regarding, traffic and some other items. There is a DEE that would be requested for height for the stair towers. The applicant can cover these features, and that's basically it for me. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much for that. We will have the applicant make a presentation, and then we will open the public comment. I've got one card from Peter Brewer at this point. If there's anyone else that wishes to speak to this item, go ahead and get your information into us, please. And we'll let you have 10 minutes here for your presentation.
This one? Thank you, Tim.
Begin whenever you're ready.
Hey, Tim? I can't see it. Is
F5.
F5? Thank you. Oh, sorry. Good morning, board members. I'm Heather Young from Fergus Garber Young Architects. As Amy said, here to talk with you this morning about 2555 Park Boulevard. There is a finish and materials board, as you see. As Amy mentioned, the proposed project would remove an existing structure and replace it with a new 3-story office building with 1 level of below-grade parking and a occupiable roof terrace that has a tensile structure above. As you can see from the rendering, the style is also envisioned to be more contemporary. The existing building is, as Amy mentioned, mid-century modern. It was completed in 1964. The site, I think you're all familiar with. It's on Park Boulevard at the corner of Park and Grant. California Avenue is to the north, Oregon Expressway to the south. The project is proposed on the developing tech corridor, and I mention that because that is part of the city's vision for this neighborhood, that they see that the tech corridor along Park Boulevard will continue to evolve in the coming years to support Palo Alto's tech and workforce and housing industries. You can see here in the site forces diagram, again, you've got Park Boulevard, which is a 2-way street. It is also one of Palo Alto's bike boulevards. One of the primary goals of the project was to improve bicycle safety on this street. The current building has a vehicular access location off of Park, as well as a vehicular access location off of Grant. The proposed project removes the driveway and the curb cut from Park and focuses vehicular traffic off of Grant. There have been bicycle accidents in this area, and bicycle safety is important to us. You'll also notice in the site plan that there are new tree bulb outs for the new street trees that are proposed. That also allows for parking to go along the street and increases the width of the sidewalk. It's required to be between 8 and 12 feet. It's actually greater than 10 feet, and that's exclusive of the tree bulb outs. So it's very much an improvement of pedestrian and bicycle safety along Park Boulevard. And you can see here the site plan with the adjacent neighbors and the adjacent parking lot on Park. There's a rear series of buildings, and then there is a development of condominiums and residential housing. Beyond that is the train tracks. Across the street is the county courthouse. The elevation you can see below here is the existing elevation and the existing mid-century modern building, a very low, very horizontal structure that appears to be floating above the streetscape. The proposed elevation is above, and you'll notice that there are some hatch locations on either side of the elevation. There is a zoning along this street that would potentially have development of 50-foot structures on either side, as well as adjacent to, behind, and across the street. We're very much aware that this is one of the newer projects coming to this area, and we're cognizant of the fact that This project will be there for a number of years, and we'd like it to integrate well with the future developments. And as such, we're trying to allow for the building to comply with existing zoning, but also anticipate the potential of adjacent neighbors and be a good neighbor to them. And you can see similarly here on Grant, the potential mass on either side of the street and our building. This is the park elevation. The primary entry is here. There's a covered entry plaza with bicycle parking. There's a green wall and seat wall. There are 2 upper floors of office, and you can see this glass and aluminum sunscreen volume to the right, and to the left and also on Park are stair towers. There's an a feature window along the Park stair tower here. There are also balconies and terraces at the entrance and at the Grant entry here. This is also the stair tower, the wraparound glass office component, and then the recessed balconies and terraces. And you can see the setback of the tensile fabric structure above. A corner perspective, again, seeing that width of sidewalk, the tree bulb outs, and the seat bench. This is the trash and recycling area. There's another pair of doors also for trash and recycling off of the drive aisle. And this is the view as you're going south on Park, the adjacent parking lot, and the landscape wall along here. And we have a short video that will fly around the project so that you have a chance to see, again, how it fits within the context. Here we are going down Park. You've got the bicycle boulevard, the entry to the building with the bicycle parking, the stair tower with the feature window fixture, the balconies, the terraces. You can see the setback of the tensile structure. The new wall here will actually provide a lot of shade to the parking lot adjacent. This green stucco wall here is a setback location, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. There's a permitted non-compliant single-family residence here, and we wanted to set back further from that in order to allow for more light and air. This is the rear interior property line, and again, another setback with an interior light well and a light well that goes down to the parking garage. You're seeing more planters for trees and landscaping. There was also one at the corner. And then as we come back around, you see the other stair tower and the entrance into the garage. I've mentioned the stair towers a couple of times. We really feel those are important elements in the design that ground the corners of the building and create the structure for the floating glass corner that comes out around. Then as we come up again, you're seeing again the setback of the tensile structure, and that would again be for a covered roof terrace. While this is continuing, I want to bring up a couple of points. One, the building is allowed to have a 2.0 FAR, and we're coming in at 1.91, less than the allowable FAR area. Also, the building is required to have 93 parking spaces. It has 93 parking spaces, all on site. There's no request for reduction of any kind. The existing building that we're proposing to remove has been minimally maintained since its original construction, and as such, it has some very severe seismic improvements that would be necessary if it were to be redeveloped. It also doesn't meet any of the building code requirements for accessibility, for toilet rooms, for site accessibility. It doesn't have a stretcher-sized elevator. The list actually goes on, as well as it's currently underparked. The other thing I would mention is that we have had traffic analysis done for the project, and the result of the analysis, which is part of the EIR, is that the impact of the project is less than significant. There are 2 design enhancement exceptions requested. One is for the height of the stair towers, and the other is for the tensile structure at the roof terrace, both of which do exceed the height limit. And we have some additional information if you have questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much. With that, let's open the public comment period. I have, looks like 5 speaker cards here. We'll start with Peter Brewer, to be followed by Jared Jacobs. You'll have 3 minutes, please.
I'm Peter Brewer. I'm the owner of the property to the, may I have your first slide up, please?
Oh, yes, of course.
I'm the owner of the property to the immediate left.
Let's have you wait just a moment till you can approach the mic.
Great, thanks for that. I appreciate it.
Right there.
Okay. I'm the owner of the property to the immediate left, next to what?
I'm sorry, Mr. Brewer, if you could stand right at the microphone so that we're broadcasting here and people need to be able to hear you. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Peter Brewer. I'm the owner of the property to the immediate left at 2501 Park Boulevard. I have 2 major concerns with this project. One is the building height and the request to exceed the allowable height, and the other is the parking. The proposed project is a 4-story building masquerading as a 3-story building. The applicant seeks to exceed the 37-foot height limitation in order to put an additional story on the roof level. That's a nice but unnecessary amenity. Heather is incorrect when she says the zoning allows for 50 feet here. This is CC2. It's a 37-foot height limitation. What's left out of the description in the staff report is that those elevator housings on the left that we can see in the left corner there go to 50 feet. So that's solid structure, 50 feet at diagonal corners of the building, closest to my building and closest to the apartments behind. Those would be decorated only by impressions from the concrete forms towering over my building and Mr. Jacobs' house, the next speaker, and leaving us in the dark, or as Heather chose to phrase it, providing shade to my parking lot. I'm not interested in having shade in my parking lot. The 37-foot height limitation is the applicable zoning. It's not merely aspirational. It cannot be disregarded every time an applicant wants to put an amenity onto their building. The applicant is requesting this variance as a design enhancement exception. Let's study the municipal code. The purpose of a design enhancement exception is to permit a minor exception to zoning regulations when doing so will enhance the design of the proposed project without altering its impact on surrounding properties. This project does not meet that criteria. Continuing, neither the director nor the city council on appeal shall grant a design enhancement exception unless it is found that there are exceptional or extraordinary circumstances or conditions that do not apply generally to property in the same zone. None of that has been shown. The only exception to the height limitation is for 10% of the floor, 10% of mechanical on the roof up to 5 feet. There's no authority to grant a height exception in order to accommodate the applicant's desire for a nice but unnecessary amenity, especially an amenity that imposes extraordinary burdens on the immediate neighbors. There's no authority. The city cannot approve this. It's not discretionary. The criteria is not met. It would be illegal. Parking. The applicant proposes to accomplish the 93 parking spaces. May I have 1 minute?
No, I'm sorry. We're giving 3 minutes to each applicant. Thank you. The next applicant is Jared. The next speaker is Jared Jacobs, please. And Jared will be followed by Judith Fields.
Good morning, board members.
Excuse me, I'm so sorry.
Sure.
Reset that. Thank you. Go ahead.
My name is Jared Jacobs. I'm the owner of the residence adjacent to the new proposed structure and Peter Brewer's office, 123 Sherman Avenue. So just about me, I've been in Palo Alto for a little over 10 or 12 years. I've been So a family friend built this house that we live in now. His name is Tom Taylor. I don't know if any of you know him. We moved in 2 years ago, and we love the property. First, let me just say that my primary concern is the same as Peter Brewer's, that he and I both have very large walls that will shadow our homes, my home and his office. I am against the height exception for the same reasons. Then secondarily, I would say that just so that you know more about the home and the area, I took this picture, which I don't know if you can see, but we have a tree here that's just a few feet from our common border. And then we also have 2 floors of windows that are 25 feet of windows from knee height to 8 feet or so. And those will basically, this entire side of our house will now be looking at a wall rather than, currently we have some sky. And I understand that they have the right to build an office building here. It's zoned, it's zoned for that. And we don't have the same protections we would have in a normal neighborhood. I understand that. But this home has been here for 24 years. And I think that whenever you're building a new property, you should take into consideration the structures nearby. Otherwise, you see this harmony in a neighborhood or an area. And I think rather than worrying about the hypothetical future neighbors and whether their building will be as high as the maximum possible future neighbor, I think if they want to be considerate, they should be considerate of the current neighborhood and the current neighbors. So I would suggest that perhaps they, do a little, they said that they're trying to move the building back, on our common boundary, but the way it's designed, this tree can't continue to be there. It's going to have to be chopped down for the wall, and we aren't going to be able to see, any sky, even if we go up and, try to look up directly against the window. I would just ask that maybe, there's that corner is curved underneath for the parking garage. Perhaps maybe they could curve it above ground as well, so that there would be a little bit more light coming into or something. I'd like to suggest that they review the possibility of having a larger setback in our common corner there. Anyway, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Judith Fields, to be followed by Helen Walter.
Good morning. My name is Judith Fields, and I live in the condominium complex behind this project. I want to speak to particularly the design of the garage and that ingress is on Grant. The situation is dire now because there is parking on all the way to the curb on 3 of the 4 corners. We can't see. We have a stop sign, and Grant Avenue has a stop sign, but that part beside the courthouse is going toward us one way. So we have only a choice to go right or go left. And what you have to do, you stop at the stop sign, and then you just inch your way up and hope that it's going to be okay. There have been some fender benders, nothing serious. But now picture this. The developer proposes to basically double the amount of cars that are going to be using that little stubby street. They've got 90-something spaces. We have 90-something spaces in our garage, and that is the only way we can get out. So now we're inching our way again, and what happens, we've got people coming from 3 streets that want to get into the little street. And can you imagine, you're sitting there, people on the right are stacked up, people on the left are stacked up, and then perhaps people from coming by the courthouse. So we've got a huge amount of people trying to make a turn, and it's just not going to work because it doesn't work very well now, and to double the amount of cars is just absurd. There's some solutions that the city could have that have to get rid of parking spaces, at least 2 parking spaces on either all 3 corners, so you could have a line of sight. We just can't see. But anyway, it's going to be a very big burden for those of us who live here and truly in unsafe condition. And the people who are developing this project will not live there, but we will suffer the consequences for years to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Now I'll ask Helen Walter to come speak, and Helen will be followed by Terry Holtzimer, who is the last card we have today. If there are any other speakers, please get your cards in.
Yes, I'm Helen Walter, and I live in the condo complex that exits on Grant Road. Grant is a tiny half block, and into it now is our garage, which the complex garage enters out into park. There's an outlet going into an area where there are buildings and parking that coming out, and the present outlet for that corner building has about 12 parking places, and those people come out to the same little piece of Grant. But now we're going to have 93 more people coming out of that one parking place, and there just isn't room on Grant for all of these people coming in and out. It just is impossible. There's no way, and because there are trucks that come in there, there's just no way this little street can handle it. It's about a half-block street, and it's already crowded and hard to manage, and 93 more parking places will make it impossible. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. And our final card then is Terry Holtzimer, please.
Thank you very much for this opportunity to come and speak with you today. I'm here today not only representing myself as a neighbor directly across the street from the proposed project, but also as a member of our homeowners association, where more than 300 residents live right next door to the proposed 2555 Park building. Yesterday, our association emailed to the ARB a letter describing in detail some of our key objections to this project. And I hope that the ARB will take the time to review our letter in detail and listen to some of the voices and the neighbors that are in the area. Many of our objections were expressed in detail at the only community meeting on May 13th. But as far as I know, that none of these concerns that we voiced at this one meeting have been incorporated into the building's design. It is now a shame that the communication that was desired from the community was largely ignored and forgotten. Our chief concerns today include increased traffic and congestion on Grand Avenue, which of course leads directly into our only entrance to our garage. We also have very strong beliefs that the design enhancement exception would be very detrimental to the vicinity, which is of course against the standards of the exception. We believe that the increased size also presents a problem. Where are you going to put visitors, for example, when they come visit the building? If you have 93 spaces just for employees, where are you going to put the visitors that come, obviously the business people? Where are they going to park? And I hope, and I hope sincerely, because my time is already short, I hope that the ARB will spend some time looking at this site and visiting with us, talking to us, because we are the residents who live there. And I think that we're the ones that have to live with the consequences. So I look forward to the opportunity to speak with you individually at such a meeting. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Just remind everyone that this is a preliminary hearing. There are no motions to be made today. We're just discussing the project and its merits or issues. And so the dialogue will be ongoing. I want to just express my appreciation and thanks to the members of the public who came today and spoke to us. We also received a number of emails as well. And so we've got all of that as part of our information here as we move forward. So With that, I will close the public hearing, and let's move forward to board member discussion. So, Board Member Guyer, if I can start with you on this, please. We'll begin.
I know it's always tough when a new building comes into an area that, especially when it's the first one, that and it's replacing something a great deal smaller than people have concerns. Actually, the initial design of this, I happen to like it. I think it's sensitive to the area. Now, I know if you happen to have a house right next to it, that's isn't really the ideal situation, but I can't see that, because the difference between, for instance, for the Sherman residents, that the difference between 37 feet and 50 feet, for instance, isn't going to be that big a change. It's still going to be an intrusion to you, no matter what's there. And, that's not really, or that sometimes that just can't be helped. I mean, it's a situation where maybe, 50 years ago there were nothing but small single-family residences in this area, but that's not the case anymore. As to the, like I said, the things that we are supposed to look at, I happen to like the design. It's, the massing, I think, has been reduced greatly by the various perceived portions of the building where there are various sections rather than one large building. I'm glad you showed us the color board, if you want to call it, because I understood what you meant by the board-formed concrete, but the drawing here really leaves a bit to be desired as far as that aspect of it. But excuse me. The main thing, I think, and this is early on, the biggest thing that struck me at this, it seems bland. The grays, the sort of a darkened beige and the light green, by the time this gets in the sun, I think you need a little bit more. Some of the colors you've got, I think, aren't going to do it any justice when it's in the sun. So I think that needs to probably be enhanced a little bit. Same thing with, I'm guessing if that's the intent to have a white awning up there, that I think is, or a beige awning or something, I think is probably also not in your best interest. It's obvious that the existing building that was there is definitely not worth saving. I mean, it is sort of 50s mid-modern, but that doesn't always mean it's worth saving. I understand all the parking on site, and I think that's great. I'm still not a big fan of car lifts, but I guess the jury's still out, because I haven't. You have to wait a while until these things actually become functional, and then they'll either prove or disprove how I feel about them. So that's fine. I'm willing to accept those, and I think it was. It's nice to see that if a particular project actually is required to have X amount of cars, that the applicant provides X amount of cars, rather than saying, honest, we won't park in the neighborhood when we all knew people do. As far as the towers, I don't think they're immense. I mean, the one in the back is basically 10 by 20, and it spans, the 10 feet direction spans a distance of about 270 feet, so I don't really think it's a massive portion. The one on the park side is a little bit larger and probably could be trimmed down somewhat, but I don't think in the overall look of the building that it is a negative aspect of it. That's probably it for right now.
All right, thank you. Board Member Liu.
So first of all, I do want to thank all of the community members who came today to speak, and also just acknowledge we did receive a lot of letters by email, and those people are not here today, but they raised a lot of very interesting issues. I think I might just start with some zoning comments and questions. So one is, I think the height has been raised by a number of people. And so I just wanted to clarify that the CC2 zoning, the height limit is 37 feet, and you are correct. And then if you look carefully in the footnotes, is when the CC2 zone is next to an RM40 multifamily zoning, the height limit goes up to 50 feet. Now this property is not adjacent to RM40, but the property in back of it is. Some of the adjacent properties are, as well as several properties on Sherman nearby. There's a whole row on one side of the street. And as I read the intent of the zoning is that the zoning is trying to encourage mixed-use buildings there. Basically, you get the 50 feet if you do a mixed-use building. If you only do commercial, they're limited to 37 feet. And so that's the intent of the code, is to encourage mixed-use buildings on those properties. It's not necessarily encouraged on this property, although it is allowed. It's the developer's choice to do commercial or mixed use. All residential is not allowed currently in the code. There are existing grandfathered things in there. Where you have, where you have an existing residential zone next to say like the CC2 zone, there are things that trigger in, like daylight planes and stuff like that, but the residential uses now are not, they're in commercial zone. So there aren't automatically like daylight plane and setback issues. But I think there are still, in the zoning, there are compatibility requirements that it fits in, and privacy issues and sightline issues and solar issues, and it's up to the board to interpret those. It's not like an automatic setback and daylight plane are triggered, but we actually do factor that into our decision. On parking, I think we did receive one email saying that the project is underparked, and I think that is not the case. The applicant could ask the planning director for a 20% reduction in parking because of the proximity to transit. It's not. I would actually am thinking that maybe it should request some, and I'll get into that later. We have had DEE applications for roof decks here in the downtown area, and I think we can discuss that later too. And then on the bicycle boulevard and some of the traffic issues, I do, I'm a bicyclist, I go up and down Park all the time. I do acknowledge that there are issues, and I do know that the city is working on refining the Park Boulevard standards. I don't know what they're talking about in this particular zone. I do welcome the applicant's widening of the sidewalk and all of that. I would say currently the zoning does sort of suggest that new curb cuts and driveway entrances be on the side streets and not on Park. And that's just this to make it safer for the Park Boulevard users. That's not to say that we don't address the things on Grant, but I'd be curious, as we go forward with staff and transportation, as if there are ways to improve Grant. I am curious to meet with the neighbors. I have been to the site, I've looked at the site, and I've actually done some work in the condos, and I don't really recall, I've been down in the garage of at least the first phase of the building, but I don't really know how it all connects, if it connects, because I know the project was built in phases. So I'd be kind of curious to see how all of that works. And let's see. On the building design, I think, Heather, you've done like a really good job with the overall partie of the building. I mean, I sort of understand how you derived it. And then at the same time, just purely by aesthetically, like it seems like it's not, at this point, it's not yet greater than the sum of the parts. Like, I'm looking at it, and I don't, I don't get like a wow reaction to it like I do on many of the other projects. I think generally, with this sort of, you have like a long, skinny site, and I think you're trying to divide the building up into 3 forms facing park, and I think that's generally a good strategy. You're trying to make, instead of having one big, long, sort of monotonous building, you're breaking it up into smaller chunks. I think that's good. I think having the balconies facing park is good because it gives depth and shadow to the building. I think I agree with some of the comments that we've received about the towers looking really big. When I look at the plan, they don't seem that big. But they do seem taller than they need to be. I'm thinking if there is no roof deck, like we could probably eliminate one of the towers. I mean, so the building code requires you to have a stair going up to the roof. So I know that you need to, by the building code, you have to have one. So I'm inclined to allow one. Usually when you have the roof deck, then the code and the fire department require 2 stairs for emergency access. So it seems like there would be a way if the board is sort of inclined not to have the roof deck, we could make the building less massive by removing one of the stair towers. I'd be kind of curious for staff is if findings can be made for the DEE. It seems like there's nothing, I can't really, we don't need to do it today, but it seems like I don't really see the special circumstance in this particular site. I don't know. I haven't really thought about it a lot. I'm curious to see if there is. And I think too, also on the building, I think that you've done really beautiful concrete work on some of your other buildings. I know you're not pouring the concrete, but you've had I've seen your buildings with the board form concrete, and I think they're very beautiful. It doesn't seem quite right to me in this particular site. It may be that the rendering is kind of very dark and gray, and you're showing a lot of shadow, and it's just reading way darker than all the neighboring buildings. All the other buildings are kind of in the brick and tan color, and so it's just reading, to me, it's reading different than the neighboring buildings. And I think that and the towers are reading, I don't know, for some reason they are reading bigger than they actually are, I think, when I look at the plan. I think that's sort of troubling. I would like to look at if there are ways of minimizing the massing of that. And then how are we doing on time? We're going to do? Okay. And then I am also not so crazy about the windows that you're showing in the break rooms, which overlook the neighbor's backyard. I know that you're showing some opaque glazing there, and I do know you have a planter. Yes, you're showing a planter there with new trees. But that is the south. That is kind of like the south face.
North.
Well, it's north side of your building, but it's their south side, so that's where they get all of their light.
Yes.
I think there was I saw some comment about a sun study. I'd be kind of curious to see the impacts of that.
Sorry to jump in.
Sure.
We actually have solar studies from the spring-fall equinox, the summer equinox, and the mid-year, and I'm happy to run any of those. We had them at the community meeting as well, so.
Great. If you could show us, and then I would, that'd be great. And then I think there was some comment that they're not adequate, and so I'd be kind of curious. I would like to know what is inadequate, if I'm interpreting the comment correctly that we received, I think, by email. I don't know. But if you could show us, that'd be great.
Yeah, I didn't understand that one either. This is the spring-fall, so it's the middle. And obviously it goes all the way from sunrise to sunset, but the majority of the day, again, you get some shading in the parking lot, the shading around the perimeter, and the building shades itself quite a bit. The tensile structure actually doesn't cast a shadow. It's so far set back that it doesn't really do anything. And the winter is obviously the deepest. I didn't bring it with me, but we also did shading studies of the original building on the existing conditions, and there was not a huge amount of difference. I'm sorry to say, Jared, there wasn't a huge difference on the impact on that house. And I honestly meant it. There was actually shading predominantly on the parking lot and not on the building for Mr. Brewer's house, building. And then the third one for the summer solstice, which is obviously the least amount of shadow. You see there. And then the end of the day.
Thank you.
Sure.
Sometimes, I'm not sure if you put it in the packet, but at least on other packets, sometimes people will put in those like freeze frames at certain times, maybe like 6 or 8 of them.
We're happy
and that'd be
to do
great
that.
because it's hard to like, absorb all of this in such a short time. I guess my thought to you would be: is there a way, if you reduce the parking, as you're allowed to do, could you shift the ramp a little bit towards Grant, and then you get a little bit larger open space to the neighboring residential use? I know you have, when you have a garage, I realize that there are lots of slope and transition things, but I would just say to consider it, because it seems like you're putting a really big building right next to the fairly smaller building, and that I know you're putting in a transition, but it's still looking pretty big to me. And then if I were, and it's also, and in addition to the sun, there are privacy and sightline issues. I think you're mitigating with trees, but then if I understand it, that the existing tree would be removed, and so all the new planting wouldn't really provide any buffer for years to come,
So I don't know if you had a chance to look at the arborist report. The arborist report came back that the tree is very close to the shared property line. In his opinion, there could be measures taken during construction to maintain the tree. He didn't recommend that, in that it's it's not a particularly
right. I understand. I looked at the tree too.
Tree,
I understand.
Yeah. And we've also offered to put in new trees on their property. The privacy issues we actually were very concerned about as well, and then I think you'll notice when you look at those wall sections there, not only is there the setback, which is obviously not required, but the windows that allow light into the break room are such that they're here. You would have to be up on a chair on a ladder intentionally wanting to look down into their yard in order to do that. It's nothing that would happen accidentally. The windows are purely to allow light into the break rooms and to allow people in the break rooms a chance to see the sky.
Great, thank you. And then we didn't get the arborist report in our particular packet because it's prelim. So, but we were just raising it as an issue.
I apologize.
That's fine. No, that's fine. Okay, I think that's all that I have at this time.
Thank you very much. And I'll just be clear, the reason I asked you to just continue is I think that an applicant who comes forward and requests a prelim deserves all of the comments and response that we can provide. That's the goal of this discussion, and I want to make sure that you've got everything from us that we can possibly provide for you to go forward. So, Alex, thank you for being so thoughtful about your comments. I want to address a couple of the public statements here, just really briefly. I too ride my bike along park as I come and go from my home to work. And this particular stretch is a tough one, right? There's a lot going on there, and I recognize that. I'd like to ask staff to please work with the Transportation Department, particularly in regard to Park Avenue and the sightlines coming out of Grant, and if there is any special requirement or accommodation that can be made to ensure that we are providing appropriate or really conservative sightlines at that edge, that would be great. And in conjunction with that, I think it's very important for us to fully understand the construction logistics for this project because of that being their really singular entrance exit, making sure that that doesn't become a burdensome or be dangerous for cyclists who are coming and going, just to make sure that that's well vetted in advance. I appreciate you bringing the solar studies today, Heather, and I think that I too am very interested in seeing sort of static versions of those at maybe not from sunrise to sunset, but at this sort of specific, maybe 3 points in the day, morning, afternoon, morning, midday, afternoon, something like that. And I think it would be really helpful if you could overlay the existing and the proposed in some way on those, so we can really see how your building as proposed is altering the current condition. I also want to ask you to please, next time we come together, to provide the north elevation as a rendered drawing. It's not in the packet. And in particular also the northwest corner. There's a drawn elevation, but I think your three-dimensional representations that are in the packet, in particular for this project, were very helpful for me. And that's the one, that's not in our packet.
No, it isn't, and actually part of our intent was to bring you things that were not in your packet.
That's fine.
Yeah, this is sort of that, I think this is the corner you're talking about?
It is.
And it's not...
Well, actually, that's the northeast, right?
Northeast, I apologize.
Yeah.
It's not as highly rendered as the other ones. This is more of an out of the model sort of rendering. But yes, we also think that this is an important corner, and we'll bring a rendered version of this corner as well as the corner that
Northwest,
I believe you're
okay.
looking for.
That'd be great, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I really do want to understand how the setback that you proposed adjacent to the residential property and sort of the character of that edge will work. Alex, I really appreciate the comments you made in regard to height and context. I think I had a similar understanding of the neighborhood as I did a little bit of analysis there, and perhaps even a diagram as part of the packet that shows which properties are at which height limits within the area, so that we could see what potentially could be. But today is today, and we're to evaluate this project based on context that exists. And so, honestly, in terms of the DEE, I'm a bit torn. I'm struggling a little bit with whether or not this is something that should or should not be entertained. I think that similar to Board Member Goyer's comments, somehow the elevations are exaggerating the dimension of the towers. And when I look at the plan, they seem like they should be less significant. When I look at the rendered elevations, somehow they appear more so. And so just challenged with that a little bit. I very much like the idea of the tensile roof, and we have had a number of projects that have had these. And I think that having the roof deck area as an amenity to the building is not a significant impact. I think that my request for you as architects would be to find a way to integrate that tensile structure into the architecture a bit more. So maybe it spans from one stair tower to the other in some way and stretches across or something, but to have just this canopy that's right in the middle of the building, standing independently somehow, I don't know, it's not hanging together enough for me. And I know we've got a ways to go on the project, but I do like the existing building, right? There are aspects of this existing building that I really like. You know, this long linear. It's got this very consistent and honestly sort of unique architecture that's interesting. And it really is unfortunate that they've let it go. You know, that it's not in a position that would make it easy to maintain or upgrade or be retained. And so I respect what you're proposing here, but I think that there are elements of this that I'm challenged with a little bit. I think that at the Park Grant corner, the floor-to-ceiling glass for me is always something that I wonder about. It's very hard to control what happens inside the building behind that glass. If people put desks right up against the window and stack up boxes right up against the window, it immediately changes the look of the building, and what you've got, which is so clean and linear and organized, can become instantly chaotic. And so, you know, we've had applicants who propose a frit at the bottom of the glass or something that will help to control what that looks like. You know, maybe another way to manage that, but I think having the building be quite so transparent may actually become pretty problematic in terms of what it looks like once it becomes occupied. I think on A3.1, you've indicated a height limit of 50 feet, and I'd like to ask you to reflect the correct height limit on that. I'm sure that was just an oversight.
I believe that's correct, and we'll go back and double check that. It's not meant to be a height limit for this site. I think it was meant to be a height limit potential for the adjacent sites, just to put it in context.
Okay, well, on A3.1 on the park elevation over on the far left-hand side, it says 50-foot height limit, and so...
I apologize.
No, it's fine. Yeah, not an issue. It's just a preliminary drawing. I just, you know, we all know that it's a 37-foot here. I like the palette that you selected. The materials that you're showing today are quite nice. Somehow, again, in the rendering, similar to other comments, you know, it's a little monotonal. And so, you know, I have more confidence now that I see the physical samples, but there might be even a little more contrast that you might want to push on this, just to create a little more variety, and I think really to get it to settle into the context of the other buildings. It really is a light-colored palette along that block. Primarily, there is some brick and other things, but the context is quite different than what you have proposed here, and honestly, I like very much what you've proposed here, and so I'm not trying to discourage you from what you're doing. Can't control what's already there, but the subtleties of the design and some of the details as we go forward, you know, looking at the railings at the terraces and some of these other things, I think will start to encourage that. Love the green wall down at the base. Appreciate what you're doing in terms of sidewalk setback and creating a usable dimension there. I think that's very helpful. The window feature in the stair tower, I think, is particularly nice along Park Avenue. It really has a nice character to it and adds quite a bit of dimension to the building. And you might study whether or not something like that is appropriate along the Grant side as well. I think because it's a street side property line, you can have unprotected openings, if I understand right. And so there's opportunity there to open up or lighten up that element in terms of how it's perceived potentially. And I think that that's part of what we're being challenged about here. I think that's what I've got for today. Board Member Courier, do you have any further comments?
Yeah, I just had one sort of a response to your comment about the canopy on, or the canvas area on top. If I agree where you're coming from, but the one thing is that sort of fights that also is when it's centered like this and it's separated, it makes it look a lot lighter and less massive. If you try tying it to the two, I have a feeling the volume is going to increase, not even so much actually, but you know, the perception of a much larger volume, especially with some of the concern of the height issues. That's the only thing I'm saying, that it may be. That's why I agree that it is a bit arbitrary right now, sort of, well, we'll just plop it here. So maybe it means you make it a little bit more playful or whatever the case is or something, but tying it, I don't know if tying it especially to the one tower would, see what I mean? That's the only thing I had. And I agree with you, or like I said, that's it. The tower seems a lot bigger here than than you think of it. The one thing, obviously, what you might want to consider is that you also incorporate the elevator, and that's one of the reasons why that particular corner gets a lot larger. You may want to take a look at relocating the elevator more inboard and see what that does. I'm not saying you have to, but it because that is the reason why this tower obviously seems to be 3 times the size of the other tower, because basically to make the rectangle, you're just sort of encompassing space in the front that really isn't necessary. Although I agree with you, if you did that in L shape, it still would, the perception would be the same. That's it for me.
Board Member Liu. I have just one comment on that to follow up, is that if there were no roof deck, right, then the elevator would not necessarily, the elevator would not need to go to the roof, so the penthouse could be smaller. I mean, you would, depending on the type of elevator, there might be some elevator overrun, but I mean, potentially it's, without the roof deck, both towers could be smaller. Right? Before I was saying that there was, yeah.
Well, one's already pretty much at the minimum size. And the one back here is already pretty much.
Right, if you didn't have a roof deck, you wouldn't have to have 2 stairs going to the roof. You only need to have 1.
Yeah, that's
right. So, yeah, so I would like to, I'd be curious to see the option, because I think that's, if there wasn't a roof deck, it seems like the building could be potentially significantly less massive. I'm not saying no to the roof deck, but I'm just saying that, it's not allowed as of right, and so I'd be kind of curious to see what the difference is between having it and not having the roof deck. Because I think that the neighbors are very upset, and I think that it could be significantly smaller aesthetically. Or if you could also, I think there are ways of designing towers, the stair towers, like they don't necessarily have to look like towers. Sometimes on buildings, I put them sort of in towards the middle of the property line, and then so you don't see the full height from the street and whatnot. So you're a very good designer. I would just say, please show us some options on this, because I think it's an issue, it's a design issue.
Just one more thing. It's funny, that's the one advantage about having a little screen is if you take a piece of paper and basically cover the awning in the top and do this, that's not really helping the design any. It makes it look like a squat 3-story building, and so I mean, that's the one advantage we have here rather than doing it there, but it really doesn't help the design. No, I'm thinking if you just cover it, or that, even that way, right? I don't think that helps it any. I'm not saying that we can't, you can't play with that stair tower a little bit, but getting rid of it, I don't think, first of all, is going to make that much of a perception if you're standing on Park. Yet I think the overall scheme would be diminished.
I don't disagree with that.
Okay, and I'll weigh in on this as well. I think that the placement of the tensile structure is far enough back that I think the view that we're seeing here exaggerates the height a little bit, and you're seeing more than you would normally see if you were standing on the street. I don't really think that a pedestrian passerby will have this kind of vision to that tensile structure that we're seeing in this sort of distorted architectural representation. I don't know what height we're taking at here, but we're certainly up at like the 2nd floor, so the vehicles and things that are passing by won't have a perception or visual access to that tensile structure in the same way. I guess the thought that I had about trying to connect it might be just that even a corner comes from one to the other and it gets stretched between the two in some way. But Heather, you are a good designer, and I'm sure you'll come up with something interesting for us.
the thought that I had about the towers might be that in addition to perhaps opening it up and adding some glass, there might even be an opportunity for some type of a glass front elevator or something that would really make the perception of that board form concrete even more slender, and that more of it becomes glass. I feel like I'm starting to get into a place here where I'm offering design for your building, and I don't like to do that. So, I'll leave it at that and ask you to just really hear very clearly some of the concerns that came from the community. And I think, does anyone else have any further comments? No, with that, Heather, if you had something you close with.
Actually, I wanted to pick up on your last comment.
Go ahead.
To let you know that after the May 13th community meeting, we took the comments that came from that meeting and we forwarded them to Russ Reich, our planner, who was there. And the traffic was a concern, and he heard you. We all heard you. Those comments about traffic went back to the planning and transportation, to the transportation group, and they requested 2 additional intersections be added to our to our traffic study. And that study was updated. The 2 new intersections were added, and the overall result, I'm sorry to say, was still less than significant. That doesn't mean that what has been talked about as far as the request to have transportation look at Grant Street more closely, and for them to look at a stop sign, because I know that was something that was brought up a couple of times, was there a possibility for a stop sign on Park at Grant? So, but we did hear you, and we did follow up on your comments. Thank you.
And, I don't think it's our role here to weigh in on whether a stop sign is appropriate or any of those things. I appreciate your clarifying all that for us, but I think I've asked staff to interact with the transportation group, and I do think a very conservative approach to certainly sight lines from Grant onto Park at a minimum is a very logical and appropriate request. So with that, I think we'll conclude this item. Thank you very much for coming forward as a preliminary. Always very much appreciated for a project like this, and we'll look forward to seeing you on this project again. Thank you. And with that, we will move forward to our 3rd item of the day, which is 3421 and 3431 Hillview Avenue, request by Bob Giannini on behalf of the Board of Trustees of the Leland Stanford Junior University for a preliminary architectural review of Phase 4 of the VMware campus renovation, including 1, revised drop-off near the main lobby entrance, 2, demolish 1 existing building totaling 85,000 square feet and construction of a new 2-story building of the same size, and 3, addition of a 10,000 square foot fitness center to a previously approved 90,000 square foot building and associated site improvements. The zoning district is Research Park RP5. And staff is here to make a presentation.
Good morning, Jody Clark, Senior Planner. Staff is requesting the ARB conduct a preliminary review for Phase 4 of the VMware renovation at their Hillview Avenue campus. The project does include demolition of the existing HTG building that's located along Hillview and replacing it with a 2-story structure incorporating similar materials as the surrounding buildings. The driveway to the west of the HTG building would be realigned to accommodate the slightly longer building, but its access point on the main driveway entrance would remain unchanged. A new drop-off area in front of the HTG building would accommodate visitors coming to this building. And then secondly, the main entrance to the campus off of Hillview would be renovated to provide better circulation in this area, and a second drop-off area would be provided near the main lobby entrance, which is the HTA building. Lastly, the approved CSG building would be revised to be 6 feet wider to better accommodate the proposed offices, and the building accent materials would be slightly changed from what was approved, from the masonry CMU walls to metal panels. This would be in keeping with the adjacent cafe building. The 10,000 square foot fitness center expansion would also help to activate this internal LA. The site does have significant mature landscaping, and a majority of the existing trees are proposed to be saved in place, and the city's arborists will continue to work with the applicants to ensure their survival. The applicant and staff are therefore requesting comments from the ARB on the proposed circulation and the building elevations, particularly those along Hillview Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I do not have any cards from the public on this item. Is there anyone here who wishes to speak to this item? With that, we will move forward to the applicant presentation. I see Mr. Giannini is here, and if you're ready, we will provide 10 minutes for you to share with us your thoughts. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Well, good morning, members of the board, staff. My name is Bob Giannini from Form 4 Architecture, and first off, want to thank everybody very much for helping us get this far in the project. We've through phase 1 and 3, and this is a relatively recent aerial of the campus. And the projects we're talking about are these. So one of the interesting things about this is, because we've been with the campus now for quite some time, we kind of know what last little things need to be done to make everything come together and work really well. So the first project is a replacement of an existing building that's up at the main entry of the campus, right at Hillview. And with that, we'll also be working to kind of clean up some of the entry sequence aspects of the project or whatever, and I can talk about those in just a moment. And then the second building we would be working on, as Jody mentioned, is a building where we already have approvals, but the building was not built. And as things happen, program has evolved a little bit, and what we're doing on this building is making it 6 feet wider than it was in its approval, and adding this wing that will become a fitness center. All of these projects are replacement square footage, so they are exactly the same square footage as what they are replacing. So we've provided a great deal of parking and FAR and coverage information to staff, but again, this, other than a very slight coverage increase, doesn't change any of the basic numbers. Also wanted to show this slide because it kind of helps see how this all fits into the whole. So here's the new building, and the new building would be typical VMware office space, but it would also house their visitor briefing center, which I think makes a lot of sense to be located right up at the main entrance. What's interesting about that is it overlooks the campus green, which is a large grassy bowl that can seat thousands of folks for all hands meetings, and the main lobby. The new CSG building, which has the fitness center now, is down at the end of the long campus alley, where we have kind of a little social area going, where we have the new LA Cafe that was just finished. By putting the fitness center here, it really helps liven up that whole end of the campus, and there'll be a few images that show that. These are the existing photographs from Hillview looking at the existing building. For a couple of reasons, it's very hard to see the existing building. It's set back quite a distance. There's a lot of existing trees, redwoods and whatever, and the site is actually down a little bit from the street. So really you look off into the tops of the trees, but these are the views of the building from Hillview. And then in the actual submittal, there are additional views. Again, here's the building that would be replaced. This is the main lobby. So some of the things we're cleaning up on as you enter into the building, there's the existing double entry drive with a median break. one of the things we're doing is this circle that exists right now is actually down here and actually hampers traffic more than it helps it. So one of the things we'll be doing is relocating that circle so that it acts more as a roundabout and lines up with the two cross streets. The other thing that allows us to do is right now we have Town Square, which is a big landscape area next to Campus Green. You come up the monumental stairs, many steps, and you're seeing asphalt. With this new alignment, that allows us to landscape the top of that. So now the monumental stairs actually float between two landscape areas rather than ending in just a sea of asphalt. That also helps create a real strong pedestrian movement from the main lobby across to the new visitor briefing center, which logistically is very helpful because many of the people who come and present at the visitor briefing center are in this particular building. And we're also creating a small drop-off area over here alongside the main lobby to clean up some of the cars that park sort of randomly around this drop-off. Then in this area where we have the new building and the new visitor briefing center, we're taking this area, which is really quite utilitarian with transformers and stairs that go down to a basement and rails and whatever, and cleaning that up into a new plaza space with a drop-off that would be suitable to hold the vans and some of the larger cars that come and bring folks to this particular building. And as Jody mentioned, we do have to realign this upper road because the existing building we're replacing is a 3-story building. This will be a 2-story building, so this building is a little bit longer than the existing building. This is a close-up view of the new entry to the new building. Again, this picks up a lot of the architecture and all the vocabulary from the existing building. But to make this building better fit its use and its location on the site, we've done a few things. This building has a big entry canopy with these brackets that occur elsewhere on the existing buildings but not used quite in this way, to create sort of a festive kind of entrance to the new visitor briefing center, and banners that occur elsewhere on the campus. Doing some little things like opening up the fascia and the soffit to let more light down and make this building feel lighter and airier. So of all the vocabulary on the campus, this building uses the buff-colored stucco and aluminum rather than the darker reddish color and stone that we use on some of the other buildings. And again, the goal was to make this particular building feel like this lighter and airier building that's sitting up at actually what is the highest point on the campus. These are the straight-on elevations of the building. The Hillview elevation is essentially the same as the elevation that overlooks the campus green. These don't have landscape superimposed yet, but this pulls back a little bit. So this is looking from Town Square up to the new building. And this would be looking from more or less the same area, but a little more closer to Campus Green, looking up to the new building. And again, in the older buildings, the glass line stopped here. These, the glass goes all the way up. We've also interjected this loggia-style balcony that sort of cuts through the fins that we have in the existing architecture and creates this sort of grandstand area that'll overlook the green. And what isn't developed yet is there's a slope that's vegetated right now that leans down toward the green. This will become sort of this little conglomeration of floating decks that kind of transition you down from the building down to the green and create all these places for people to be kind of a different experience on the campus and looking over the green. The other building is CSG, so this is down at the bottom of the campus alley, which is this 700-foot long path that slopes down at about a 5% slope all the way down the site with a water feature that follows the entire length. And as I mentioned, when you get down to the bottom, you have the Alley Cafe, and as you may remember, we have 3 different kinds of landscapes: the fruit orchard, the oak chaparral, and then the palm oasis. The palm oasis will now span across to this building to create a whole sort of social center down at this end of the alley. And you can see the fitness wing here. Again, this doesn't add to the FAR because the 10,000 feet this building has grown, and actually I have this image, is all amenity space. This is an image of the alley as it exists right now, and the arrow kind of points to where the new building would occur. So this is the fruit orchard, the oak chaparral, and then the palm oasis beyond. This is without the real trees, but a computer image of looking down the alley to see the new fitness wing that I think actually helps give scale to the alley and also activates that piece of the campus. This is an image of CSG modified now also to be aluminum and a little glass here. We've changed the canopy, and this is the fitness wing and the entrance to the fitness center right here. That's the pathway that takes you right across from the cafe. And a close-up of the entry, and again, some little bits of new vocabulary. The way the canopy works on this building is new. Straight-on elevations. And finally, no DEE requested. This building fits with, actually our highest point on this building is 33.5 feet, which is the average of the sloped roof. And you can see that right here. There's a sloped roof, and that would be the average point. Thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions. Boy. Okay, we'll leave that one.
All right, thank you very much for the presentation. See, I think, did I start with you, Lisa?
I just have one quick question.
Board Member Clear, go ahead and start us off.
I have one quick question. Bob, on the HTG building on your A1.1, that north elevation, you said, is that matches one of the existing buildings, or sort of a mirror image of that, or?
The buildings are very, very close cousins, and the average person would say they match, but there are little things we did different to them to give the building this feeling that it's a little bit more public.
Okay. Okay, I was going to say, because that elevation is a little weak, but I wasn't here when, the rest of the whole project was approved, so I don't want to sit there and, okay.
Yes.
I'm good right now then. That's the only question I had.
Board Member Liu.
I have a question for staff. So, and maybe applicant too. So you were mentioning that you don't need a DEE, but as I recall, you do have a DEE for the existing CSG building, which was not built. So I guess my question for staff is that renovation, since that building is changing design, are we reviewing that all over again as if from scratch, or is it considered an existing approval that's just being modified at a staff level or subcommittee level? I'm not quite sure what we're doing here.
If I can jump in, actually CSG did not have a DEE. It was E and F because they have the glass prow on the front. CSG actually never had the glass prow, so it was different than the other.
Can you refresh my memory? So I know there's the glass prow issue, your conference rooms, right. But also in the center of the building, you had some clear story windows as well.
You're right. That is correct. You are right about that. We do have we have clear stories that are linked up with the mechanical. You're actually right. Yes.
Okay, great. And then for staff, how do we process that?
So I'm sorry, but maybe the applicant could clarify again. Is the building that was approved with a DEE going to be revised and have no need for a DEE, or?
No, I misspoke. Actually. The clear story element is consistent with this, so we would need to maintain that existing DEE for the clear story, which is the roof screen element in the center of the building. Yeah.
Typically, we have an allowance for mechanical equipment alone to be at a 15, up to 15 feet above. But if there's a feature that includes more than that, then that would become a DEE request.
Right, and then they've been doing that on many of their buildings on the site. So
right, the original
yes,
yeah,
the ones from back in the early 2000s
yes.
on the promontory did each have
they did
clear story windows that went through the DEE.
Right.
Yeah.
So I guess how is the staff processing this? Is this all modification, well, it seems like the new building is a separate application, right?
So right now, this is a prelim application, so
Right.
there's no
There's
action
right.
for this
But
one.
potentially this is actually 2 projects.
If there's 2 different addresses, and we've handled multiple campus buildings in one application, but call them out by building address.
Okay. Okay, so so first of all, Bob, I did look at the site yesterday. It's looking really good. The fountain is spectacular. I think the buildings look handsome. I think the worry that I had always had was that your renderings look kind of dark. But whenever I looked at your material boards, everything looked good. And so now when I actually see the 2 things all together in real life, it looks good and it looks very handsome. So I think my main question for you is regarding I have 2 questions. So the HTG building why is it rotated 90 degrees compared to all of your other new buildings? Because it seems like it's protruding into the perimeter loop road. And it seems like you have like 2 rows of sycamore trees, and then there's like an oak grove on a berm. And it seems, I know you have your site plans, but they don't have the trees on them. And so it seems like you're impacting, existing vegetation. And I was wondering if the building was rotated 90 degrees, then you would impact the soccer field, but you wouldn't necessarily impact the loop road as much. So I was wondering what were the factors in siting the building as you have?
Right, I think you hit the nail on the head. It was the soccer field or the loop road. And the interesting thing about the loop road, and I don't know if I have a good image here, currently right now, the way the loop road works is it goes straight through, but it also actually goes up here now for some ADA parking.
Right.
And so this road actually already exists up here. So what we're doing is instead of having a double road, just having a single road. And it actually came down to that. I think if we tried to put in a sort of the proper visitor drop-off area and try and maintain the soccer field, which is would be verboten to even consider losing the soccer field. It just doesn't fit. So this way it actually seemed like a fairly minor compromise to lose one piece of the loop road.
And then did you consider just a different building shape altogether? Or, I understand from the VMware's perspective, having similar floor plates is advantageous, but it seems like this site is a different shape. I was wondering what other options have you thought about?
Yeah, originally yes, but in truth, this site actually fits this shape almost perfectly. So we actually have a little tiny bit more buffer at the soccer field, which is helpful. This edge of the building is pretty much where the existing building edge is, which feels very good on the site. This edge is pretty much precisely where the existing building is, so that feels really good. It doesn't crowd the other functions on the site. So really, by putting the building this way, the only thing we're hurting is that little piece of loop road. If we had rotated it, I think a couple of things would have happened. One, you'd have these 2 buildings broadside to the green, which I don't think would be as interesting as seeing the one building broadside and then the other building coming into it this way. It also reinforced the main entry drives to come along the long side of the building. And, it allows us to have this kind of long, low, lean kind of elevation along the main entries, which I think was the right image. So actually, we didn't think it was a compromise at all. This, not only is it a floor plate that works well for VMware, but I think it also fits perfectly on this site.
Well, I think the other issue, I guess the other consideration too, is that it's not like people are using the loop road, right? People are using one little segment of it to,
yes.
Right, but people aren't necessarily just driving in circles around VMware, so it's not like a
right. Especially
campus drive
here,
on Stanford or something, right?
Especially here, because if you come in the main entry or there's the old main entry over here, the circulation between this piece right here there's no buildings up there really, so there's actually very little parking and very little building up there.
Okay. And then my second question is about the new gymnasium.
Yes.
And if I recall correctly, when Judith was on the board, she was asking you where the gym would be, and you guys said that it was in the basement of an existing building. Yeah. And she gave you a nasty look. And I think she would be happy to know that she was right, and you're putting it in a prominent place as it should have been all along.
She would. She was at the site recently.
Okay, good. Oh, yes, thank you. I missed the open house, but thank you for that. So my main question, though, is your proposed site for the gym is sort of embedded into a hill, and it seems to me kind of, I don't know. At this point, just as a preliminary, it seems awkward, and I just was wondering if there's any way to do something about that. I think the idea of having the gym is great, and I like having big windows in the gym looking out over the landscape and stuff, and it seems like when you're embedding it in the hill, you're losing some of that openness, potentially. I don't know, I haven't really looked at the layout and stuff of the gym or whatnot, but it seems like it's a missed opportunity, I think, if, for a connection to the landscape, if part of it's embedded into the hill.
Right. No, just a couple of words. One of the things about the site that's so great is there's so much topography. There's about 100 feet from Hillview to Foothill. So, and we filled the thing up with landscape. So for such a big site, it's amazing how precious each square foot is. So this building is actually kind of positioned so that it's sort of the proper distances from the parking structure for code reasons. So we wanted to maintain this edge of the building. It does push the fitness center up into the hill, as you mentioned, by about 8 or 10 feet at that point. Yeah. So we have the locker rooms. This is the 4th fitness center on the campus. Right. So the big fitness center actually is a glassy building that sits all. Right. Well, actually, part of it is built into the ground too, but. What's nice about this is we can put a retaining wall on the back side of the building where it goes into the hill, but this is the large fitness room. It's this whole end of the building. So you get windows out the 2 sides where we can scoop down so that light can flow in through there. Plus we have clear story windows up at the top of that hill. Then we have 2 studios here and here. You enter it at this point, and then the locker rooms and smaller rooms are kind of tucked in over here. But we've been able to scoop out the landscape to carve out big glass areas on both sides. So, but you're absolutely right. We do lose the opportunity at the end of the building. But that also makes it kind of nestled into the hill as you go down the alley nicely too.
I was thinking about that too, and I was wondering, what about like a green roof or something to integrate it into the landscape? I realize that the green roofs aren't not necessarily the best bang for the buck for our climate, but
and I've done them. It seemed like because we have the standing seam metal roofs on the slope roof pieces of these buildings that was sort of the right thing to do here. We also tend to, over time, cover them with PVs. So when you look here, you can see the buildings in back are completely covered with PVs. So not saying we're doing it on this one, but VMware likes to have the option to add photovoltaics. Good. So it just felt like the right choice on this to keep the standing seam.
Okay, thank you. I think that's all that I have at this time.
We do have a skylight set in the center of it, a big triangular skylight.
Great, right. And I think it's good that you have the locker rooms sort of in the bigger building so that you can keep the roof of the lower building relatively clean because it's more exposed from viewing.
It is, and all the mechanical equipment will be in the main building, and it'll pipe over at the mezzanine level.
Okay, good. That's good.
Okay. Thank you for coming forward with this as a preliminary, Bob. I really appreciate that. I always like to mention that. I don't have any issue with the additional 6 feet of dimension that you're requesting here. I think that is a in similar fashion to all of the work that you're presenting today, a logical and very practical approach. And my personal opinion is that this is aesthetically very consistent with everything else that's out there. I had an opportunity to move around there really for the first time myself, and really enjoyed what has occurred out there and the approach that's been taken. And how it's been executed over time. I think this will be a nice addition to that. I was a little concerned about the corner of the fitness center being pushed down, but as I thought about it a little bit, I'd rather it be the fitness center that's pushed in there that somebody might go to for an hour versus an office space that somebody's in all day long. And that's a very different. I worked in a building that was partially submerged for a couple of years, and it's not the greatest place to be. So having the fitness center do that, and I know you've got a lot to deal with in terms of all the slope on the site, so I think this is a good approach. I have to say that I have virtually no comments for you here. I think that the approach that you're taking makes a lot of sense. There's so much context here that is already present, and it seems that you're so consistent with what's already in place that this is not a difficult discussion for me in any way, and I look forward to you coming back with a proposal that's reflective of what we're seeing today, and I think I'll be prepared to support that unless there's significant change. Mr. Clear.
Yeah, I agree completely. This is one of the very few submittals we get in that I really had no marks up at all or whatever. So I'm very pleased with what you presented, and if it comes back like this, I don't have any problem supporting it.
I'll just say, staff asked us to comment on the Hillview Avenue frontage, and I think I don't really. I don't want to say I don't care. What is the word? It's not a main concern. Normally, you're concerned with the main street frontages, but in this case, because it's heavily landscaped and set down from the street, you don't even, when you go down Hillview, you don't really even see any. You don't really actually see anything. So I don't really have a comment. Issue with the facade. And then I would say that I looked at all of the facades, similar facades on the existing or the recently completed buildings, and they all look fine to me. The materials are handsome. There's depth and shadow and whatnot. So, so I think it's fine. And then I think the thing the board had expressed curiosity about was just the vagueness of the entrances at VMware. I mean, I think we do understand that VMware, the employees can use multiple entrances, right? That's a comment on some of the previously approved buildings. And I think what you've done here is emphasize one facade facing the drop-off with a trellis to give it more hierarchy because there are more visitors, presumably going to that building. So I think that that's all appropriate.
Great. So as this is a preliminary, there's no action to be taken here today. We'll just ask staff to clarify any of the issues regarding the DEE going forward so that we can manage that quickly and easily. And with that, we'll close the hearing on this item. And thank you to the applicant. And we'll see you soon, hopefully. Thank you. All right, so moving forward, the next item, number 5, was a study session for the downtown DAS project. That study session, as I mentioned before, was advertised for this date, will be postponed to the Architectural Review Board meeting of June 19th, 2014. So at this point, we'll look for Board Member Malone Pritchard to come back, and we'll just take maybe a 2-minute break here while she returns.
Prevention wants you to know that you're never alone. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Local volunteers are ready to listen and help you find answers about how to survive your crisis. For help, call 415-781-0500. That's 415-781-0500.
Earth Justice is a non-profit, public interest law firm dedicated to protecting the places, natural resources and wildlife of the earth, and to defending the right of all people to a healthy environment. The work that Earth Justice does includes the enforcement and strengthening of environmental laws on behalf of other organizations and communities. For more information about Earth Justice, please visit their website at www.earthjustice.org. That's www.earthjustice.org.
Go back to our meeting here. Our next item on the agenda is any board or staff announcements, updates, reports, or comments. Is there, do I ask for, having not done this particular piece of it before, do I ask for just a general response, or do we just move on to the item that's listed?
Yeah, I mean, item 6 is to prepare for Monday. Last night, worked on a bit of a PowerPoint, collaborated with Randy to get it to a point where we are paring it down. My feeling on the approval findings and conditions is that those can be handouts. I'll put them at the end as pocket slides so we don't have too much technical gobbledygook to throw at the council. So we're basically just focusing on purpose, role and responsibility, and just generally that we have 16 findings, and they're a handout if they want to peruse them.
And maybe I'll just back up just for a moment and describe. I think all of this has to do with our discussion with council Monday night, and a particular thought that we should have a discussion with council in response to some of the recent public comment we've had, and just perhaps the fact that it's time for us to reconnect with council about what our role is, what our purpose is, how we conduct ourselves, and make sure that everyone is clear about that. I have had a conversation or two with council members, and they weren't precise about knowing exactly what our role was and where we stop and where a PTC might start, where there might be overlap, et cetera. And so while we won't get into what the PTC does, I think our thought was that we would have just as an agenda a bit of an introduction, that we would potentially very briefly touch on some of the purpose and role elements, and maybe not list them all out, but maybe just pick out 2 or 3 or 4 of the highlights of what's really important about how we approach applicants and projects that we are charged with reviewing. Appreciate very much the staff time that went into putting together a summary of the last 2 years worth of reviews, and some time that was spent then trying to organize that and to draw some conclusions from that. And I'd like to maybe start our discussion today by just asking others here on the board if there are specific conclusions you've drawn from those statistics that were put together. Is there something that jumped out at you about that we should be illustrating to council? I think it's, digesting that quickly is always hard to do, but if there's something in that
big version. Yeah, well, it's a previous big version, but it has the statistics on there.
Got it.
You might be referring to the overview, the summary of the statistics. That actually is the raw copy of the statistics.
Okay, that's great. So I don't know if anyone is prepared to share their thoughts about the statistics at this point, or if that's something that you wanted to maybe relay by email back to staff once you've had a bit more time to digest it.
So when I was looking at the, when I was looking at the table, I always look for like the big numbers to see what pops out, and I think that there were various circumstances regarding the ones that had like 6 or 7 different hearings, and my thought was to have a comment line. Sometimes the applicant is changing the project. Sometimes it's something we're not happy with. I'm not sure that there's a consistent pattern, a reason why like one project might get, have many, many hearings. I mean, it didn't really pop out at me, but I did think that we should comment on it, because it seems kind of excessive if a project has like 7 hearings. I mean, I think that we should sort of just explain it very briefly.
Especially given that there's a limit to the number of hearings we're allowed to require. So it would be good to get something in there.
Well, the limitation applies to the formal hearings, as I understand it, and in the data that was presented, there was only 2 projects that I could see that had exceeded the 3-meeting limit. One was the 537 Hamilton Avenue project, and the other was 405 Kirtner. I know on 405 Kirtner, we made a decision as a board to proceed with an additional hearing on that item.
I think,
the applicant
with the
asked for it.
applicant's concurrence.
Right, and exactly. Yeah. And so we asked the applicant if they would be willing to come back for a 4th, and they were, and so we were able to move that project forward at that point. You know, I want to make sure that the number that's the total out at the far right isn't necessarily something that we're super focused on, because you know, oftentimes I think in the number of subcommittee reviews that occur, it has to do with us being critical and careful about how we're proceeding and making sure that the intent that was part of the approval expressed by the board is maintained throughout the duration of the detail and finesse of the project.
I think the subcommittees, if we can phrase it as, I mean, it is flexibility to allow the, you know, finer details on landscaping and other, you know, minor treatments to, you know, come back. I think that we're giving a good service to the applicant to move it along, that we could make that comment. I think the 537 Hamilton, I'm guessing that the reason there were 4 major is because they came back with a DEE as a separate application. So I think that we need to fix that. So it's 2 applications.
It's actually
and then also sometimes we have an extra hearing because the environmental assessment has not been completed, but we still hear the project because it's been noticed and people want to speak to it, so we actually hear it and then continue it because we can't necessarily approve it before the environmental notifications.
Right, and sometimes that's a strategic move. In other words, so we don't have to go with a recommendation at that time, but we are opening it up for public comment and allowing the ARB to, you know, give direction, and then we come back with a formal recommendation.
Right.
So.
I think if we just have a footnote just saying that these are some of the issues at the bottom, maybe we don't have to get into detail
so
on the whole list.
If you wanted to outline what some of those issues are and maybe email that in, we can add that to the document. That would be great. And then anyone else have comments or thoughts about the statistics? I think the thing that I thought was so interesting about it was that you know, only 16% of the projects actually moved through with 1 hearing. I think some of that has to do with the fact that some applicants are...
Does that surprise you?
Yes, it did.
I mean, what, as being...
Yeah, I think that some applicants are potentially, or are more prepared, more thorough in their application, and so they're successful.
So what you're saying,
in the first round,
I guess my question is, the perception is that 80% of them go through without...
I think there's a public perception that we're
That's what I'm saying.
Rubber stamping projects and just moving on.
Which is funny, because being, you know, as you said, the new kid on the block, and having done this for 8 years up in another municipality, I mean, it's quite stringent here. I mean, having sat on the other side of the, you know, the bench also sort of thing, but yeah, in fact, that number seemed very reasonable to me. It, you know, didn't surprise me at all.
It didn't surprise me either, and that was part of why I did this quick little analysis of how much time I thought was being spent. And just, you know, this was based on my own experience of how much time I spent preparing for a meeting, looking at projects, the time spent on average in hearings themselves, and then multiplying it out by the 5 of us. You know, we're close to 2,000 hours worth of time over the course of 2 years, and when you divide that up by the number of projects that we've looked at here, you know, we're spending as a board almost 17 and a quarter hours on each project.
And then
That's
people look at you and say, and you don't get paid for that?
Right. For a volunteer position, that's a commitment. But I think, you know, we've all bought into that, so that's okay.
Can we talk about the project list? 405 Kirtner is not forthcoming with the images, so I think we're going to have to drop that one.
We don't have historic images of that in the
Yeah,
packet that we could just pull for?
I don't know that we have them digitally. Part of the problem is like 135 Hamilton came before we started getting digital copies on the website. And so, you know, we're trying to work with applicants to go and give us old plans.
Okay.
You know,
I was thinking we might be able,
electronically.
is there a way we can just quickly scan the images that were in the packet that we received?
Oh, and here's Zaria because she volunteered to help on this project.
Thank you, Zaria. Nice to see you.
So one of the things that we would like, you know, to clarify is which images. So for instance, I have here 135 Hamilton, Speak of the Devil, and 636 Waverly. So maybe just if you could take a look and so we know which view.
Yeah, I think, you know, for 636 Waverly, for me, this image that we had of the front elevation of the building.
Front elevation, okay. Because sometimes there's a rendering, like a kind of a 3D rendering.
Yeah, you know, that elevation, which was the Waverly elevation, compared to the approved Waverly elevation, you know, the sort of zigzagging concrete, right? That, you know, those are, I think that's
how it came originally?
That's how it came originally.
That is quite a difference, yeah.
Right, there you go. I think that's our goal, is to illustrate that a little bit. And I think and just to briefly state publicly, the intent of these examples is to show the range of change that happens over the course of interaction with the Architecture Review Board. Not all of it at our direction necessarily, but certainly the fact that we're influencing the projects, I think, in
those two,
many cases has really dramatically improved the result. Yeah, I think, you know, we've got projects like 135 Hamilton, and you know, there's these street elevations that look like this, and the final presentation that we received and the approved drawing is quite a bit different.
I'm curious to see what the board thinks. I think my take on it is better to use a 3D image because elevations can be very hard to read, even for architects, because you don't see the depth. Like one of the issues that the council has is that, like say for example, like the fourth floors aren't being set back on one particular project, and the elevations don't necessarily show it. It's hard to see the depth if they're not shadowed correctly, and even if they are, they tend to look bigger than they actually are. So
I don't see any there that.
If we have it.
If we have it, yes.
Right.
If we have it. And
I'm respectful of staff's ability to pull this together.
If there's some massive changes, it's very easy to see very quickly.
Yeah.
And I also generally save all of the drawings. So if there's something that you don't have, I have paper copies of most of.
I'm sure you have everything. It's a question of how accessible is it.
Yeah.
So.
If the thing's been built, the old copy for initial submittal might have been tossed.
Okay.
For instance, so we'll have a look at the ones. So
like Alex, I don't throw anything away, and so I've got boxes of all the applications. And
it helps having a basement
under my desk.
I guess.
Tucked away under my desk, but
I use mine for camping equipment.
I'm gonna.
I get you. Can we go over the list just because Claire's got some suggestions?
I know they're so tiny.
Is it actually on here somewhere at oh, here we go.
Actually, I can.
Very last one here.
I can open it.
We have the last sheet of the one which you just gave us has the list.
Oh, it does have Claire?
Yeah. Very last one.
There you go. Thank you, Robert.
And the reason I included those was I wanted to focus on the impact we have in these particular projects. There were significant impacts and changes that happened between the beginning and the end of the process. And also a couple that were unsuccessful, you know.
So
going to that rubber stamp concept, sometimes we send them back and say, you know, it's really not working for us.
I'd like to suggest that I think 636 Waverly and 500 University are good examples of significant change. If 405 Kirtner is hard to come by, I certainly have the documents in my office. If you want to just scan those, we can use that. I do think that that's a good example of that, but in place of either 135 Hamilton and or 405 Kirtner, are there projects here that you'd prefer to see as examples, Claire?
I think it's more what we can get drawings of. Any of the 5 successful applications would be good, but I don't know how many of them we have available or Alex has available, because these are older, they predate several of you.
Board Member Liu may have these in his archive somewhere.
I mean, I think we can go beyond, you know, 4 with the approach of doing pocket slides that are just a paper handout, basically. We really only have 4 slides of text, including the you know, the overview slide that says what we're going to talk about. So, and we can get through those rapidly and get right into the pictures. So I guess, you know, how many projects do you want to show, do you think?
Well, I do want to, we'll have a brief introduction, and then I think we'll ask Board Member Goyer to just touch on some of the primary statements about what we do and why we do it, what our charge is, and then a brief recollection here of what the statistics are, and then we can spend some time on this. But my goal is to have the entire presentation that we do in front of the council be, if we can get it to 10 minutes, great. If we can get it to 8 minutes, better, because the more time we have for discussion with them, the more we'll gain from the interaction. So really trying to limit this to the greatest degree. I like the idea of pocket slides, but I think, you know, with 4 or 5 of these, we'll have illustrated our point pretty clearly, and we don't need to spend a lot of time pulling images together.
So you want me to address some of these then, the 16 points, okay?
If you want to talk about it, we can. So, Board Member Liu, did you have any particular comment about which projects we might illustrate? A strong feeling one way or another?
Yeah. So the list of successful applications is
Feel free to suggest another.
I know. I'm trying to think. This is not the list that I would necessarily put together, but that was just my, you know, gut reaction. But I don't really have a suggestion at this time. Generally, I think that there's concern in the community about you know, the same old issues like north versus south, El Camino, the hotels, and it seems like those aren't necessarily well represented here.
Although there is the one unsuccessful hotel, the 441 Page Mill.
Yes.
Actually, I do think that the hotel that replaced the Palo Bowl at the corner of Monroe and El Camino, this is the one right next to my house, having been part of the architectural team who first presented that versus what it is now, I think it's a pretty significant change, and that might actually be a good project to illustrate. And you know, one of the things that came up about that one was we were forced to have that really up against the sidewalk, and a lot of the comment coming from the public now, particularly in light of what occurred last Monday about the Grand Boulevard discussion, is that people don't want buildings up against the sidewalk, but at the same time they don't want the buildings not up against the sidewalk. You know, it's
So I think the issue is, are we trying to do what we consider successful applications or applications that have points of interest that are?
So what I was trying to do with this list was stay away from anything that has political overtones, which is why I didn't include any of the hotels. So I wanted that to be out of the discussion, and B, pick out projects where I thought there was a big change from the first application we received to the final application. But I'm absolutely happy to look at other things, other ideas. It was just
I'm a little less
what I thought
concerned
of.
about the political overtones, because I think that what we're talking about here is the realm of influence the Architecture Review Board has, right? We are not talking about the zoning issues that influence Maybell. We're not talking about the width of sidewalks. Those are not the issues that are up for grabs here in the discussion.
Parking.
Right? Parking and traffic. What we're talking about here is character and quality, and how an initial application that's come through either as a preliminary or initial formal.
Then the best solution still would be the ones that have changed the most. I mean, in the general public's eye.
Or
As you said, the one you had there
or
with
been
the
denied because we
cross-bracing.
didn't approve of it.
Well, okay, that too, but I mean, you know, if we get into subtleties, people are gonna glaze over, yeah.
Is the Clement Hotel, that's a hotel on El Camino, it's not south, but it did change somewhat from first to last. And I don't think it's controversial, and they actually provided a much deeper, you know, sidewalk with the outdoor area. I don't know, that's another one that I don't see on the list, but if you wanted a hotel that's not controversial.
Right, well, I think that there are some projects that kind of evolve, and I think that the Clement Hotel is one that evolved. And then there's some that go through radical changes, and so I think maybe it'd be good to have an example of both. And I think I agree with Randy about 636 Waverly, maybe less so about Hamilton. I don't know, go either way. And I think Palo Alto Bowl is an interesting one. I mean, I think that one could easily consume an entire discussion. I mean, maybe that's a whole separate discussion.
It did feature prominently in the sidewalk discussion meeting when Councilmember Holman mentioned her.
I think in the opening statement that
impressions of-
hopefully Lee will make, if not, I will. I think, you know, one of the things that I will try and describe is that we're really trying to contain our discussion with the council to those items which are within our purview. And that items like traffic, parking, sidewalk setbacks, all of those other issues, while important, are not relevant to our discussion with them because it's not within our realm of control.
That needs to be brought out very clearly and very early.
I think
Those are the ones that everybody objects to, and then complains to us why we're not doing something about those.
I think it would be nice to address the context-based guidelines that are in our code as, you know, as guidance that staff uses, as well as the ARB. You have your findings. You also have context-based guidelines, and you're looking at context. I mean, I think that is something that...
Include that as part of the packet, you think?
Yeah, I think that would be good.
Okay. So if you have further thoughts about examples or can help with producing the documentation we'll need for those, let's all directly communicate with Amy and her staff about that. I think I understood you have some limited time and some constraints, right? So we need to do that today. Are you back on Monday?
Yeah.
Okay. And when does the packet go out? It's gone, right?
The packet's already gone.
Okay.
So this is, sorry. The PowerPoint is supposed to be with the city manager's office by, you know, Friday typically. It just happens that tomorrow's a 980 Friday, so we're not here. So I'm trying to finish it up tonight.
Okay, so
yeah.
Let's all keep that in mind as we're trying to feed information back. And then I think the last item that I wanted to ask all of us to have a brief discussion about here is that I'd like to have our group bring forward to the council what we see as challenges that we face or suggestions for improvement that we might put on the table as something from our perspective. And the 4 bullet points that are listed here currently are just part of a discussion Lee and I had briefly one day in a very informal way. But
which one's that?
I wanted to, it's the second to last slide. I wanted to just ask others if they had other topics that they'd like to include on that list. I think that being able to share that with the council in a very clear way will help them to understand what we struggle with or where we might ask them to either provide some guidance or even promote some change. So maybe I'll just read these off quickly. The first was recommending that we require preliminary for all major reviews. That would definitely be a change. That we find a way to create a better understanding of the ARB's purpose, its role, its responsibilities within the council, out in the public, and within the press as well. And this might even be a PR piece that we publish and put up on the website and send out to the newspapers, et cetera, but really clarifying the Architectural Review Board's role versus Planning and Transportation Commission, help people to understand that we're not design control, but we're architectural review.
What do you mean by design control?
There are boards out there who say, no, you have to make it look like this. Right? You have to have a stone base.
It used to be like that.
It used to, but it's not today. And my understanding of our role is that we are to respond to what is submitted to us.
You made a good point. You made a good point early on, and that was sort of the first thing that I was told. You're not up here to design the thing. Right. You're here to comment on what's presented. So
that's the way I read it, and I believe that's correct. Right. Okay, and very precisely that we are not responsible for parking and traffic, because very often members of the public come to us with frustration about that and leave frustrated because we're not doing anything about it.
We get it in almost every project.
And then my thoughts was that we would create some outreach to educate about project reviews and in particular how we've had a positive impact, maybe share some of these statistics, but also find a way to try and increase public participation, because I do think that that's so helpful. But I'd love to hear any other suggestions or thoughts about how we might amend or supplement this list.
Well, I'd like to start by saying I don't support requiring preliminary for major reviews. Okay. I strongly suggest it. I think it's a really good idea, but I don't think it should be a requirement. It should be up to the applicants to chart their own course.
Okay. Others want to weigh in on that or other items?
No.
And that can actually be a point that we look at when looking at the data, is just pointing out that the projects that do have preliminaries are more successful. It can be information we provide, but we don't require it.
I have to say, I was surprised when I saw that. I expected that the projects that had a preliminary would move through more efficiently. And I don't know if that's because the projects that come through with preliminary are typically the more complex or larger projects. And so ultimately, they would take longer as well, or it's hard to read into the data and understand what that might mean. But I had an expectation when I received the data that projects that had a preliminary would get through in less reviews. Not the case.
I think, as you said, it's because the perception's already been made that it's going to be more complex, so we need the extra.
Certainly helpful, but I think I agree with you about saying that we strongly suggest, but not necessarily require.
I have a thought. I think it's maybe for the next council meeting, because I don't think we have time to do it today. But other cities do very different things with regard to design review. So I was wondering, maybe it makes sense, maybe possibly in the future we sort of outline some of the other ways. Yeah.
Maybe benchmarking, looking at how other cities.
Mountain View handles it very differently than Palo Alto, or some of the little towns up in the hills require like story pools for every house project or so. Like Mountain View does it's more like an internal. I mean, it's just a much smaller board and more like meetings. But also the council has more of what they call it, a gatekeeper aspect about allowing projects in and out. like which projects are going to be heard that year. Yeah, so I mean, it's just very different, and I think it's, I don't know, it's interesting to me to see what other cities are doing, because I think the results are very different too.
Yeah,
I say like San Jose, which doesn't have design review.
Part of that relates to governance too, how
Yeah.
how we're set up. That you recommend to the director. I think in other cities, you're right. The council or planning commission actually has a decision-making role rather than recommending. So it's it's different city by city.
That's going to take more time. So
actually, Robert, that's one of the things that I think is important for you to emphasize, perhaps as you're describing our role, is, let me just make sure I say this properly, that we recommend to the director, that we recommend to council, and we support planning staff, but we are not a decision-making board.
Right.
We are a recommendation board, as opposed to Planning and Transportation Commission, which does actually, as I understand it, no, they don't, they recommend as well. Okay, I misunderstood.
they recommend to council, we're recommending to the director.
Okay,
And
I thought there was a
difference.
formality to their process that is different than ours.
No, all of the planning commission work is a recommendation to council.
My misunderstanding. All right. Anybody have any further thoughts about this? I think, again, we'll try and be expeditious about our presentation and garner as much as we can from the comments that we can get from council. We'll hope that Lee is able to participate.
And this represents a great deal of work here. Thank you to the two of you for what you did.
Thanks to Board Member Marlone Pritchard for your consideration of other projects as well. Thanks.
All right, so with that, let's return to our agenda. I think that was the final item for today. I don't see any subcommittee items today, and so with that, we will adjourn. Thank you very much.
Our next meeting is July 3rd, so we do have a quorum for that meeting.
We
can I
cancel
ask
the
about?
19th?
Can I ask about the Monday night council meeting?
Oh,
because there were two. Well,
sidewalk
there was an
ordinance?
appeal and this
That.
sidewalk, and I followed it on the web, but I didn't completely understand what transpired.
Board member reports, right? I closed too soon. I'm sorry. Yeah.
So it was great because Randy was able to attend the sidewalk ordinance discussion. And so what happened is, they appreciated the work that we had done. There were definitely some attendees, business owners with properties along El Camino. Nobody was really fully in support, said, go for it, this is great. We pretty much knew that would happen. And so they pretty much...
No one that came.
No one that came. But it's been problematic because of the one-size-fits-all, approach that we were taking per the direction to, widen the sidewalks down El Camino. So I think the direction was, table it. You come back with a kind of surgical build-to-line removal. And one of the motions was to codify further the context-based design criteria more into a development standard. So it's a little awkward because they're in the code already, but how they're written is, in a guidelines section rather than a standard. So we'll be taking a look at that, but not right now. The comp plan effort and our Palo Alto effort will incorporate what do we want on the Grand Boulevard, on El Camino, height, buildings, all of that. So I think that's going to wrap into that effort and probably include other thoroughfares, as was the interest. And Randy, did you have impressions?
Yeah, no, I'll just say that we did what was asked of us, right? We received a direction from council as a result of this memo that came out asking us to evaluate and to provide some feedback about this. I appreciate the significant time everyone spent on that. I think that ultimately this will play into the discussion which will occur over the next couple of years in the comp plan reinvention, and we'll see where it goes. There were 12 or 13 people who came and spoke that evening. They were all quite concerned about what they saw as a taking. I think there was clarity from staff that it was not a taking, but a concern about that, and that the general consensus was that El Camino is not a pleasant place to be, and turning it into an ideal walking street or biking path didn't seem highly realistic. I will say that I thought that Councilman Berman's comments were right on point, and that what we were doing here was looking at something that was not for this year or next year, but it's really a 20-year vision about where this will go, and that over time the expectation is that El Camino will start to transform, and that it will change, and it might become a different place if we're thoughtful about it, and if we align ourselves with what some of the other cities along El Camino have done. It really could have a significant impact. And so I'm still hopeful that some of the aspects of what we recommend will be incorporated, but time will tell. But thank you to staff for all the time. I thought, Amy, your presentation the other night was really right on point. Very well done. Thank you.
So was yours. Thank you again for all your participation. Then the other item that was on the agenda and is on Monday's agenda as well is the Mayfield residential project on Upper Cal Ave. So there was quite a few members in attendance on that, and stood up, with Mr. Balin, who's the appellant. And so that goes on Monday, again on consent. They can pull it off and schedule a hearing. There is already a hearing scheduled for June 23rd on the tentative map. So if they decide to discuss the architectural review application, they would handle that on the same night, the 23rd of June.
I want to ask a question about that, if you don't mind. So, and this is probably outside of our world here a little bit, but just to help me understand how this works. My understanding is that Mr. Balin's appeal has to do with dimension of streets and some site organization that really is not something that has been approved yet, right? What we've got is a design concept that has been approved in terms of planning, but this is all going to go through the building department and be vetted by traffic division. There's a lot to be done here in terms of a project approval, and so it seemed to me that this appeal is a bit premature.
Yeah, the appeal is timely because it occurred after the director's approval of the architectural review. So the second part of that two-step process is the approval by council of the tentative map. And while the appellant feels it's premature to have a discussion or to, that they should go together, it's not actually the case in our code. They can take action to confirm the director's approval of the design, and then those specifics about the street width and the sidewalks and fire access and all that, discussion about future logistics plans, those are all related to the tentative map. And that is a public hearing already on June 23rd.
Okay, but it actually hasn't been determined yet, right? That aspect of it hasn't been approved yet. Is that
not approved. The Planning Commission has recommended the tentative map.
Got it.
And there's all those details in there, dimensions of streets and parking and sidewalks. And yeah.
All right, thank you for explaining that.
Okay.
All right, so
My quick question, as you said, our next hearing is July. Is the June 16th a canceled hearing?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Or June 19th?
No, I'm sorry. I'm thinking too far ahead. I'm a planner. June 19th is our next hearing. July 3rd is a go, is what I really wanted to say, because we do have a quorum. We were testing the waters because it is so close to a holiday. Another meeting that I should mention, 261 Hamilton that just went to you today, is also going June 23rd to the City Council and they are actually making the decision rather than the director, because it's also coming with a reclassification that engenders bonus TDR.
Great. All right, so With that, we're adjourned. Thank you.